You have been communicating your entire life the wrong way. Like the entire world is like you, a nice person, good intentions, trying to do the right thing. Here's the truth. The world is not like that. There are difficult people all around you every single day, and there will be more. The secret today that we're going to talk about is that you can take back your peace and power from toxic, obnoxious, hard people, even people you love who are also just difficult. But in order to do it, you need to know the rules of the game. And most people don't even realize the game they are playing. So today, let's get those rules and communicate to get what you want, even when other people say it's impossible. We'll back it up by science, history, and the greatest communicators of all time. Let's steal their homework. Welcome back to the Big Deal Podcast. I'm Codie Sanchez. Let's dive in. Most people don't lose their power because they're wrong. They lose their power because they communicate like the other person is reasonable when they're not. Do you ever think you're exchanging information, but realize that the other person is negotiating status, blame, or control? Psychologists call this motivated reasoning. So people don't actually listen to understand you. They are hearing to protect their identity. So Harvard Business School found people interpret facts in ways that protect their ego and self-image, not accuracy. And do you ever wonder, how do you actually beat them without becoming one of them? Well, maybe you haven't noticed this, that the most difficult person in the room often gets their way. They interrupt, they blame, they drain everyone else. And somehow they walk out the winner. Meanwhile, the reasonable person, calm, ethical, they walk out exhausted, pissed, kind of confused. Toxic people don't win because they're smarter, which is good. They win because they're playing the game differently. What Harvard shows us is that this dominance behavior shows that people who display low emotional reactivity and high certainty are perceived as higher status, even when they're wrong. So toxic people are persuasive not because they're right. They're persuasive because they're unmoved. They have low emotional reactivity, but they really act like they know what they're talking about. So how do we win at their game? I think about this as the asymmetry advantage framework. If they are willing to create discomfort in you and not have emotion from them, they can exploit your asymmetry. And there's two types of asymmetries toxic people use. One's called narrative asymmetry. They tell simple stories. Yours are too nuanced, because nuance is usually the fact. Cognitive fluency research shows simple narratives are believed more than accurate, complex ones. So whether you hate Donald Trump or you love Donald Trump, what can we say for sure? He is simple. That is why his communication style works very often, because nuance is hard to remember. They say on average, we can only remember 1 to 2 sentences from an entire 10-minute conversation. Yikes. So clarity beats correctness in human conflict. So that's one. Take your stories, simplify them. Don't add maybes, buts, alsos, and one sentence. That's it. The second asymmetry that people use who communicate well, which is called boundary asymmetry. They take space. You ask for permission. Clinical psychology says boundary violators persist when boundaries are inconsistently enforced. This is from the American Psychological Association. What does that mean? It means you need to control the frame. Let me give you my frame control rule. So whoever controls the conversation will control the outcome. And this comes from hostage negotiation and power dynamics. For instance, if you are going to have a conversation with somebody, they give you a tight one-line sentence. You want to respond in an unnuanced way. What do I want you to do? I want you to listen to their one sentence, and then I want you to hold out your hand and just go, let me think about that for a second. Let me ponder that. Let me analyze that for a second. Whatever word you want to use. And then instead of feeling like you have to start talking immediately in order to regurgitate exactly what you're going to say, no. Boundary control? You say I'm the problem. The math says this is the problem. Use a redirect and have a one-liner. I actually learned a lot of this from one of my friends, Chris Voss, who wrote Never Split the Difference. Huge book. I go back to him again and again when I want to control the frame. And what he learned at the FBI law enforcement was that reframing emotional accusations reduces hostility faster than a direct rebuttal. When someone says, you never listen to me, what do you actually want to say? You want to say, if you're me, that's not true. I listen all the time. This never happens with me and my husband, of course. That's the wrong response, though. The correct response is a frame reset. You are going to repeat back to them, I understand that you feel this way. Can you be more specific with me and tell me what you think I am not listening to? And when you do that, I can bet my bottom dollar they might say, I don't feel that way. That is what you're doing. And your response is going to be, I don't want to debate words in an argument. I don't believe that's useful. What I heard you say was, you are unheard. You're not accepting their frame. You're not saying, I didn't listen to you. You're repeating back to them what they said. So, when I went head to head with another MD, managing director at First Trust, I had this exact same issue. He was trying to box me in, make me feel small. He was trying to tell me that what I was talking about was wrong. And I remember the line explicitly that he said to me back in the day. He said, well, I haven't done that because you've made me feel like I don't have the power to do it. This is your fault for the way you communicate. First of all, this is like a very middle-aged man. This was a full adult. And so I always do giggle when somebody says, you make me feel this way. I'm like, okay, guy, take it easy. But anyway, I listened to it and I said the exact same thing. I said, hey, I don't think I have control of your feelings. Are you saying that I can control your emotions, your emotional state, what you feel inside? That's not up to you. That's up to me. What do you think happens? Well, no, of course, no, what I'm saying is, okay. So I said, so instead, what do we want to try to resolve? And so I want you to try this. Tell me how it works for you. Do not accept somebody else's frame. And by the way, we're not being combative because oftentimes this is with people we love. This is not always in business. It could be in love. This is just a way to make sure that you become a person who has boundaries. How do you respond to disrespect? Back in the day, I always wanted to be like one of those characters on Entourage, like Ari, if you guys ever watched that show, where he fired the heat. Like somebody came at him and he just had a response. And I'm not like that. I'm actually a wuss. And so I developed something I called the disrespect response ladder. And I was like, okay, I need to figure out a path to use. And I'll show you that. But when somebody disrespects you, you kind of have 4 options. And most people jump to the worst one. So level 1 would be absorb. This is really weak. So you just say nothing. Resentment builds, respect drops. This is normal for people like me who are a bit of an avoidant. Like, I just don't want to deal with it. I don't have time for this, So if that's you too, I hear you, I'm the same. Level 2 is react. This is explosive. Yell, defend, explain. You look unstable and absorb their frame. Level 3, explain. This is more naive. I do this too. So over-justify, you over-talk, you signal insecurity. When I first tried to get a job, I was notorious for doing this. Hi, my name is Codie Sanchez, and these are all my accolades, and, here's exactly why you should hire me, and da-da-da-da. And I've learned over time, little pause, exactly what you need, not a single word more. Now, the God tier level response is level 4, which is name plus redirect. That comment feels disrespectful. If you want to talk, I'm open. If you want to attack, I'm done for the moment. This literally just happened to me the other day, you guys. I was dealing with a leader at one of our companies, and I gave him some hard news that somebody else was going to take a role higher than him. He did not like this news. Proceeded to start cussing. This is fucking bullshit. I'm worth 10 of this guy. Bullshit, fucking blah, blah, blah. And I had to say, this is a call with executives. Executives at my companies, they don't cuss emotionally. So if you need to take a minute and stand outside until you can emotionally re-regulate, that's perfectly fine, and come back in. But we don't do angry cussing at the executive level. That basically says, this is my line. And it's hard to argue with an unemotional, clear line. This goes back to that idea of assertive communication with calm boundary setting that is perceived as dominance, which is kind of crazy, isn't it? A fancy way to say the key is calm is actually better than loud, short is better than long, still is better than emotion. And my friend Jefferson Fisher, who I had on the podcast, it's a great episode, by the way, you should listen to it after this, has a great line about this. He says, you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. So good. And then he also says, silence can never be misquoted. But if, say, they keep gaslighting you and you don't know how to defend against it, I got a little protocol for you guys. Think about it this way. Gaslighting defense protocol. Gaslighting is reality erosion. It's things like, that never happened, but you know it did. You remembered it wrong, but you know that that's how it happens. What it actually does is this increases cortisol and anxiety by destabilizing perception of reality. This is from the American Sociological Review. And this is actually used in torture, which is crazy. But let's set a couple things straight. even though you don't see reality the same way, there are a couple studies that are fascinating that I think can help you even explain to the other person who's making you feel a certain way that maybe it's not gaslighting, maybe it's just human nature, because we do have a different perception reality in almost all events. So self-belief is really about knowing yourself, your abilities, and knowing your path. And it's part of that path that many of us get stuck on, which is actually why I created something called Main Street Millionaire Live. And it's for anyone whose path includes business ownership. Whether you've already bought a business or you want to buy a business, we help you find and buy the best business for you, because business ownership, I believe, will change almost everyone's life. I know that if you come to this event, it will change yours. It will help you believe the truth, which is that you are capable of ownership and can win at the game of owning things in life, which is the only game that leads to financial freedom, asset ownership, and overcoming what I think holds a lot of people back. And so if you don't think you're good enough to become an owner, to get to the next level, I want to talk to you about 4 studies that totally changed my mindset on that. The first one's called the invisible gorilla. So in the famous Chabris and Simon experiment, participants watched a video of people and they were like passing basketballs. Have you guys seen this? And people were told to count passes for one team. So you're watching it. You're counting all the passes. You're kind of focused on that. Well, in the middle, a person in a literal fucking gorilla suit walked through, stopped, thumped their chest, and walked off. What's crazy, and I swear this happened to me, half the viewers, Cody, never saw the gorilla at all, even though it was literally in plain sight. But I had told my brain that I was only watching this thing and I was going to get those numbers right. Totally missed the gorilla. Study 2, I see it clearly, you're biased. Social psychologist Lee Ross called it naive realism, which is the belief that I see the world objectively, and people who disagree with me must be uninformed, irrational, or biased. And there was a perfect way to think about this. Like 2 siblings read the same news article about a political protest. One sees dangerous extremists. The other sees brave citizens. Each is certain. They're just describing what happened. When they argue, they both feel like the other is literally blind. In reality, they have all of these preset beliefs and identities that color what details they notice, how much weight they give them, and what story they assemble. So they literally live in 2 different realities from the same article. This is also like selective attention. So your brain cannot process everything. So it spotlights what matches your current task, fears, goals, or things you've told it are important. That creates unintentional blindness. And there's lots of mental models about this. So expectations, culture, past experiences, they act like lenses and they decide which data counts, what gets ignored, and that allows you, your brain, to create a personalized version of reality. And so the moment you think, I'm just being logical, you actually stopped listening. The moment that you think you can't buy a business, you actually have just been pre-programmed to think you can't. So how does this show up in your fights and communication? A couple examples. You might say, you ignored me at dinner. And their reality was, I was trying to handle the check and the kids and I thought I was helping. You say, you never appreciate what I do. Their reality, they do appreciate you, but their appreciation cues are invisible to you or not in what, they famously call your love language. So the takeaway, same night, same facts, totally different edits, because attention and stories are pointed at 2 different things. So you have to learn how to negotiate across these realities. So you can say, okay, listen, last night, it looks like we kind of watched 2 different movies. We saw 2 different realities. Would you mind if we each described our version without interrupting? This signals, 1, there are 2 realities, and both get airtime. And don't ask or assume, swap the why did you do that? That's an attack for what were you trying to do there? Curiosity. You're asking for the intention behind their movie. You're not cross-examining it. And then you can mirror their key frames. So repeat back their big beats. So in your version, you were stressed about money, trying to solve it fast, and my feedback felt like attack. People relax when they fear their movie is at least understood, even if you didn't see it. Now, what's great here is unrelaxed people do not come to the table. And so you are going to be this calm on the balcony in the storm. So you're going to stop arguing about whose reality is right. Say both can be true. In your reality, you were helping. In mine, I felt alone. How do we design the next scene so we both feel on the same team? This is key if you want to be a CEO in business. You need to negotiate forward, not backward. Instead of replaying the old scene for the 12th time, You could say, next time this happens, what do you need from me? Here's what I need from you. This just happened to me. I had a member of the team, and my team, and he's a super high performer, great team member. I gave very direct feedback to something that we had done because I sometimes have the emotional EQ of a Tasmanian devil. And so I just don't really think about it. I go, here's the feedback. I know you worked on this thing for 3 years, but here's all the things I hate about it. I only focus on the stuff I don't like. So I sent him very direct feedback. Bam, 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 da, 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 da. I didn't mention anything I liked. I didn't mention how great he is. I just gave all the hard feedback. This sent him into a spiral. I've done all this work, da, 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 da. So once I realized he was on this spiral, what do? I call him into the office. I sit him down and I say, hey, I just want you to know how valued you are here, how intelligent I think that you are. And I want to tell you something about the way that I communicate with people that I trust, people I think are super capable, intelligent, and I would consider one of my leaders. I don't have a filter. I talk just like Cody with no sort of rose-colored glasses or hand-holding happening. That can be too much for people. It can be pretty abrasive. And so I want to tell you that I thought your project was great, but I always default mode think your work is great. And because I think you're so good, I'm only going to give you the edits. How can I communicate better with you? And the guy was like, actually, no, I do want you to just give it to me tough. And I said, okay, well, if that's the case, then next time, if you do feel that little ping inside where you're like, God, she doesn't appreciate or whatever, do you want to just say a word to me? And I like using a word that's ridiculous. So I'll be like, blue-throated mockingbird. Just say blue-throated mockingbird. And I will know that that means I kind of pissed you off and you don't feel like I saw you. And I can be like, oh, whoops. Hey, man. Here's what I actually think. Can I give you some context? And I find that when there's a high degree of trust, you can have a trigger breaker that basically breaks up the standard communication and it changes people's state. So try this and see if it works for you. Because sometimes they are difficult or toxic people, not people you love, but sometimes they're people that you love too. And so I want you to remember that it's okay to say, we remember this differently. Here's what I'm confident about. Here's what I'm not debating. And then stop talking. Because one of the other things that's true is silence is devastating to gaslighters or emotion. It can kill either one of them. So one of the most powerful things that you can do in communicating is to never be emotional in a world of people who have never emotionally matured. Projection theory shows people attribute their own traits and insecurities to others, right? This is from a famous study by this guy by the name of Newman, I believe, back in like the 90s. 90% of insults are just self-disclosures. So when someone says you're selfish, what it often means is I feel deprived. So you have to mentally reframe them. What would need to be true about them for the behavior to make sense? This allows you to create that balcony emotional distance, and that distance creates power. I mean, Jefferson Fisher also says something amazing that I really love, which is the first thing about standing up for yourself is knowing when to do it, because not everyone is worth getting out of your chair for. Also, he's like Texan, so I love these little one-liners. He's like, not everyone is worth getting out of your chair for, you know? Like, you're right. Shucks. So this ability to not take things personally shows your self-respect. And I'm going to tell you the truth that it makes people who are trying to manipulate you super uncomfortable. I remember I was getting pushed out of a company and this guy wanted to intimidate me. And thankfully, I do believe like a pound of pre-production is worth 5 of post. So I found out about it ahead of time. And he might have sidelined me, but I found out about it. So I did a silly thing, which is I brought my Navy SEAL, very scary husband who has a constant resting bitch face, a lot of muscles, and an ability to, kill people with me to this meeting. And Matt was not expecting that. So we sat down at a hotel and I could see he just like starts twitching, getting nervous, whatever. And I could tell that he was just going to leave it. He's like, I'm going to wait until Codie's by herself and I can try to intimidate her. But what did I do? I brought it up instead. I said, Matt, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to push me out of the company. You want to take all of these assets that I've raised. You want to push me out. And I know this because of XYZ. And he's like, oh, well, no, I said, listen, this isn't a debate. I already know. And so the next question is, what are we going to do about this? Because I am not going to do what you want me to do here. And this is something for you to know. Like, you have to decide how you get defined. And it's not just about holding yourself or others accountable. It's about the way that you allow them to write your story. So I don't want you to fall into what I call the accountability trap, which is when someone says, you never do what you're going to do. I instead want you to use that specificity switch we talked about. And I want you to make sure you stay away from things like never, always. And instead, I want you to say, tell me one example you want to address, right? So why this works is because the more we can get somebody like Matt to go, oh, no, I'm not doing that. I go, no, you are. I heard about this conversation. Now, what are we going to do about it? Well, that allows these false accusations to collapse under precision. Valid ones become solvable. Okay, you want to push me out? What's the contract? What are we going to do? And the research says that specific feedback leads to resolution. Vague blame escalates conflict. So keep it simple and specific. There's sort of like 3 rules of power communication if you're going to try to negotiate something like I did with Matt. So if you have somewhere where you know somebody is bullying you at work, your boss wants to push you out, you have an employee that's toxic that you have to fire, you have what is called a crucial conversation. You're going to slow down because slow speakers are perceived as more confident, remember? There are studies that show that slower cadence increases your authority perception. So you're going to say less. You're going to end with direction. You're going to say, here's what happens next. You're not going to leave the conversation open-ended because you actually beat them by having a very clean exit. So we're going to cut the frame. You're never going to argue their accusation. If they say, you always try to redirect me, Cody, you're going to say, that's not a useful direction. What outcome are you asking for? You just removed their emotional hook. Then you're going to limit exposure. Toxic people don't want to change with feedback. They change with reduced access. So you're going to say, hey, we're not going to communicate that way. Hey, you're not going to speak to me like that. Then you're going to enforce consequences. Boundaries without consequences are just suggestions. That's not what we're going for. So you're going to say, if this continues, I'm ending this conversation. Then you might actually have to end it, by the way. Back yourself up. You might have to end it because consistent consequence enforcement is going to reduce repeat violations. So if I let that employee keep cussing at me, well, he probably would keep cussing at me the next time. Then you're going to use an A for anchor reality. When they distort facts, don't debate. Say instead, here's what I'm willing to discuss. Here's what I'm not. We're going to reality anchor, specificity anchor. And then N, no closure needed. This is critical. You do not need them to understand, them to agree, them to apologize. Seeking emotional closure from antagonistic people, that increases your stress. Lots of studies on this. The power move is to say, here is how we are going to execute the end of this conversation. And you can walk away not liking the guy, not liking the girl, being mad. That doesn't actually matter. So if a business partner, an employee, someone creates conflict with you, remember, loudest person's going to dominate early, but you're going to not. You're going to stop explaining. You're going to reduce access. You're going to enforce terms. And suddenly they're going to lose their leverage. And I remember, the moment I stopped trying to win emotionally, I won structurally. Let that sink in for a second. Stop trying to make them feel what you want them to feel. Do you care about their feelings? No. You care about the outcome you want to get. And then also remember, toxic people don't win because they're evil. They win because everyone else is so busy trying to be liked. But leadership isn't about being liked. It's about being clear. So you don't beat toxic people by out-arguing them. You beat them by outlasting, out-structuring, and out-limiting them. And the most dangerous moment is when you realize you never needed to fight them at all. So the question you have to ask yourself is, do you want to argue with small people? Do you want to allow yourself to become small because they are? Do you want to be an asterisk in a paragraph in a book nobody reads because other people got to redirect you your whole life? Do you want to just not be taken seriously by a serious person? Do you want to be remembered? And if you do, you got to communicate these ways. Because unless you figure out how to communicate, you'll never achieve anything really big in your life. It is the key to the things that you want. So maybe you'll be like me and you'll come back to this video, you'll watch it again, you'll follow and subscribe, and I promise I will teach you the lessons that I wish someone had taught me. But most people were too afraid to tell the truth. I promise I won't do that to you. Okay, guys, we'll see you next week.
We are sitting on a generational wealth creation event. If you're here, this means you're a builder. As we're going through these next 3 days, I want you to know that the American dream starts with you guys by our little Main Street revolution.
And then I just want to give you guys permission to take a leap of faith.
If I knew then what I know now, I would probably do bigger deals.
It's given us an extra layer of security that we never would have had.
I am so excited to introduce you to some ordinary people doing extraordinary things.
We have to really take the time to make a meaningful connection. It's the fact that there is a lack of connection and the person just wants to be seen, heard, and understood.
Thanks for taking the question.
Are there extra things that need to be done when trying to pay off bad debt?
Great question.
I buy businesses so simple, even your grandmother understands them. That's the game.
It's you and me versus the problem. We're going to try to solve this together.
I know how to build trust in a very advanced way.
How does buying a business fit into the vision for your life?
Today, my goal is to teach you some fundamental skills that you can use to accelerate your business.
If you make a promise in the mirror, know that your word is freaking iron to you.
These people on Wall Street, they want to keep the normal people out of the game.
Main Street millionaires are all around this world, and it starts with each and every one of you.
What are you waiting for? Your path to ownership starts now. Get your ticket to join us on Main Street. Join us today.
He was a hedge fund manager, an entrepreneur. He's written over 20 books, sold companies for tens of millions of dollars a few times.
I remember going to the ATM machine, looking at the same account that once had $15 million in it and had $193 left. Everybody was coming up to me saying, no one's going to invest with you ever again. Like, you're admitting these failures. Do we prefer a world where everyone is lying, or do we prefer a world where everyone's just open and honest with each other? Am I ever going to come back from this? Am I ever going to be able to rent an apartment again, feed my kids again? I would Google how I could myself without hurting myself.
Bring the band in. Let's go.
I've been a fan of the next guest of the pod for years, actually. He's written, I don't know how many books, 20 by now. He was a hedge fund manager, an entrepreneur, sold companies for tens of millions of dollars a few times, and has a list of 1 million accomplishments that goes on. A couple of them that are fun is like Grandmaster? Chessmaster? Chessmaster. This shows you how much I know about chess.
Not quite as strong as Grandmaster.
Chessmaster, comedian. But one of the main reasons I remember reading your stuff is all of that might seem not that relatable. But when I was in finance, you also were really honest about the highs and the lows of life, and you talked about your failures. And so I wanted to bring you on today, James Altucher, to talk about not just all the successes that you've had, but the world's getting a little hard. I think a lot of people are struggling, and they don't see that many people that have gone really high, gone low, and then been able to come out on the top again and are willing to talk about it. So I'd love to talk to you about that today. I'm stoked to have you here.
Yeah, all of my favorite topics. Thank you so much, Cody.
Oh, I was kind of, I was laughing as I was writing out questions because you've been so open with it. Do you ever wish that you hadn't been that open? Because then is it like PTSD? You keep going back to the same subjects again and again?
It's interesting because no, I'm glad that I've been so open. I feel like that's what writing is about, is to be vulnerable and to share a piece of yourself through words to other people. It's like you it's like you put a part of your life on this boat that goes across this giant sea to other people on the other side. And that's the only way you really can really share a piece of yourself to other people and vulnerability is that boat.
It's true. You have a tweet that I've loved, which is that sooner or later, enough bad things happen to you that you can begin to enjoy the best written books, which I think is also the way you write.
Yeah. And like, I remember there's a lot of books, and you probably remember this too, like we had to read these books in high school. They were the worst books on the planet at the time. But then when really bad stuff happens to you and you reread these books later in life, you're like, oh, I didn't know that's what he was talking about or she was talking about. Really bad things happen to them too. And it's the language of our past fears and failures. That is the real way we all connect. Like if we all just had like $1 billion and we met at cocktail parties, we're going to connect in this real superficial way. But if we're saying, look, I had this hard time in a divorce, you had a hard time in a divorce, let's say, then that's an area where people connect at a very deep level. I'm not just talking about divorce. That's just an example, or go broke or whatever.
Yeah, it's a trust transfer that I think only happens when you open up a little bit, you show the cracks, then other people are willing to do the same.
Yeah. And in like finance, nobody was doing that. Like I realized like everybody was perfect in finance. They never were wrong. They were on CNBC like, oh, well, of course they're going to decrease interest rates and the market's going to go up or down. And everybody's like just talking their portfolio and arguing with each other. And no one's being honest. Like the first time I wrote something saying I had gone broke at one point, everybody was coming up to me saying, no one's going to invest with you ever again. Like you're admitting like these failures. And I'm like, well, the alternative is to lie. And that's what everyone else does. So do we prefer a world where everyone is lying, or do we prefer a world where just everyone's just open and honest with each other?
Yeah, it's so true. You know, you talked about, I think the company's names were, you sold Reset for 15 mil-ish, Stock Picker for 10 mil-ish. And then 2 years after, you were like, the thing is, I'm broke.
In both cases.
That's so, just curious. What does it feel like when you hit that zero? Like, what does that feel like, losing 15 mil for somebody that hasn't? By the way, I've lost a lot of money. So no pot kettle here.
Yeah. So it's the worst feeling in the world. It really is horrible. Like this is going to sound horrible too, but if you lose a close family member, like for instance, around one of these times I lost my father, and that was very painful to lose your father, no matter what age you are, to lose a parent. And very, very painful, very, very hard. But there's a process for that. There's a grieving process. And then you always remember, I always remember my dad, but you move forward. Life goes on. That's the normal cycle of things. But going broke feels worse than that, because there's no normal process of going broke and moving on from that. Like everybody hides the fact that they've gone broke or had failures or so on. So people don't really discuss this that much. And also you don't know the future. You don't know, am I ever going to come back from this? Am I ever going to be able to rent an apartment again, feed my kids again? Should I just kill myself now? Like that's how bad I thought. I would Google how I could kill myself without hurting myself, because I didn't want to have pain in the process. By the way, there's no way to really do it, so I wouldn't encourage it. But there was a point where, because I wrote about this, there was a point where if you Googled, how do I kill myself, I was like the #1 search result on Google. And then enough people complained that Google had to manually put in the National Suicide Hotline to replace me as the #1 search result for that.
Which is probably not better, actually. I think, one of the interesting parts is the world's getting kind of hard. We were talking about how we think a lot of tough things are going to happen in commercial real estate. There's a small, real estate Twitter group of people where a guy that was well known in that group just killed himself, basically because he was going broke. And he had kind of issues with debt and how he had executed on it. And so I think one of the reasons it's really important to talk about this is because most people don't. And we all get kind of egoically wrapped up into how much cash we have in our bank account and what our title is without even realizing it. So one, I think it's really cool that you talk about it. It must be really, really hard, especially when you were one of the first ones. What actually happened? I've read lots of different accounts. I've heard about it. In your words, how did you get there?
Yeah, so it didn't happen because I was buying big, expensive things. So I remember at one point, look, there was the internet boom. I sold a company during that time, but then I cashed out. So I remember just hitting reload on my, account, and there was $15 million cash in there. And I was so happy, because you do feel happy. Now this whole thing I've had to worry about my whole life. I was born broke, lived broke, grew up broke, and suddenly I had this money, which meant my kids were going to be okay. They wouldn't have the worries that I grew up with or my parents grew up with, and I did it. But then suddenly I saw, all these other people are selling their companies in this internet boom, and I would look at my 15 million and it didn't feel like a lot anymore. Like this is going to sound crazy, but this is how I thought. I actually felt all of a sudden like I was broke, even though I had the 15 million. So I felt, you know what? I'm going to make 100 million because then I'll really have something to talk about. And so I started. So how do you go from 15 to 100 million? Well, I figured investing is the way to do it. And I knew nothing about investing, but the problem with making money is you think all of a sudden you're smart. Like, oh, I made money in this one area. You discount the fact that part of it is luck. There's always a luck factor. You discount the part that there's a lot of people involved in making any one person a success. And you discount the timing and so on. And so I figured, okay, well, I'm smart. I made all this money. I'm also a smart investor. For some reason, everyone was asking me for investing advice because I made money designing websites. And so I started investing, and I didn't know anything about investing. I would invest in the wrong things. I would not do any kind of risk management like, oh, sure, let's put 200% of my money in one stock or one deal and just wait and see what happens. And then, of course, the internet busted, and a lot of people went from paper rich to paper poor during that time. But I had cash money, and I just simply went broke. And I did buy a house, so bought an expensive house, which was more expensive than I should have paid. And I just kept pouring into the stock market and in private deals. Every single investment I made failed during this period, private or public. And I just had no sense of risk management at all. I put $2 million into an IPO, came out at 20, went down to 19 the first day. And I figured, oh, this is a bargain. All IPOs are supposed to go up. This made a mistake. It went down. So I put more money into it. And of course it goes to $2. And it was like a wireless device for deaf people to communicate, as opposed to every single device now, which has texting and so on. So it was useless. And, but I did like many deals like that, and someone worked, some wouldn't, but over time, most didn't work. And, within about a year or so, I was like dead broke. And I remember going to the ATM machine, looking at the same account that once had $15 million in it and had $193 left. And my mortgage at that time, because I bought this big place, was like $18,000 a month. And it was just really insane. Like, and I was really scared. I had these two babies, and I was super scared. And then it's just awful.
So how did you get out of that?
I would say there's no one way, but basically you have to realize that it's not just, no one's going to just drop money and opportunity in your lap, particularly when you're on the downward trend, like when you're going broke. All the people who were friends with you going up, none of them are friends when you're going down.
Zero? Like no friends were the same? Did any of them stick with you through it?
One, who by the way, I still work with and talk to every day. Like he's basically my main business partner, and this is like over 20 years later. So one person out of maybe hundreds. And so you have to become, and if you let your brain just go to its own devices, you're going to be depressed every day. You're not going to move. You're not going to want to wake up. You're not going to want to do anything. So you can't really function even. You have to sort of overcome this depression that whether it's clinical or situational or whatever, you're going to be depressed and scared. So you have to put all that aside. And I really became, because if I didn't have kids, I don't know what would have happened. I would have, who knows? But I was really determined to every day, at the end of the day, make sure I was attempting to be physically healthier, emotionally healthier, creatively healthier, and for lack of a better word, spiritually healthier, which really just means if I can't control it, I can't worry about it. And so, this is during this period where how do I be creatively healthier? So I started just randomly writing down 10 ideas a day. And it could be 10 bad ideas a day. Like it could be a list of businesses I would start. It could be a list of books I want to write. It could be a list of chapters of a book that I want to write. It could be, here's 10 ideas for Codie Sanchez, and I'm going to send them to her. All of the above, and many other things. And so many things happened just from that one practice. Like, I I became more confident because, I could suddenly have ideas that I'm excited about. Like, even if they were like stupid ideas, I would get excited about some of them, and that would give me enough dopamine boost to survive the day. Whereas before I didn't have the dopamine boost. And then if I sent somebody 10 ideas, most of the time they wouldn't respond to me, but sometimes they would say, hey, could we meet? I love these ideas. Maybe you could do these ideas for me and I'll pay you. And suddenly I started, for the first time in years, like this going broke process was like a 2-3 year process. And suddenly for the first time in those years, people were reaching out to me. Can you help me do something and I'll pay you? And it was just based off of ideas I've given them. And I've been doing this now, writing 10 ideas a day for over 20 years. Because I send many of them out, I've been invited to speak at Google, Facebook, LinkedIn. I spoke at Airbnb's main conference. I've been out to Quora and met all of them. And just so many different opportunities were created for me by coming up with 10 ideas a day. I've been able to sell businesses because here's the ideas, the synergies between your business and mine, so you should buy my company, and on and on. Like, it's really, even though most ideas are bad, I'll throw out most idea lists and never use them or look at them. But that process probably lifted me out. Didn't make me a millionaire, but it got me a writing gig, for instance. Oh, we'll pay you $200 an article, which I was desperate for after having 15 million. Or, I'll give you $5 million to manage, because I became obsessed with learning with what I went wrong with investing. So I was reading hundreds of books about investing and starting to successfully day trade. So I gave somebody, a big hedge fund manager, I sent them my software for how I do my investing. And he said, well, I don't get your software, but I'll give you $5 million to manage. And then I started a hedge fund out of that. So on and on, things happened.
Yeah, it's funny because when I first heard you say this, I thought, well, ideas are kind of worthless because it's execution that matters. Why would ideas matter? That was maybe the finance side of me. And then
but you're right. But I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I?
Get in there.
So execution ideas are a subset of ideas. Like let's say I'm going to start a business. All right, I could say, well, I'm going to need to hire someone to make a lot of software, and then I'm going to need a lot of money for marketing, and then I'll know if my business is good. So I need to raise $2 million. So that's one way to execute on an idea. Another way to execute an idea is, what's a manual way I can do this service that I'm proposing to do through software? And can I contact any of my friends and do this service manually and see if it's something they'd be willing to pay for? And then I can test for no money, and no, I don't have to raise any money to validate an idea. So that's two ways to execute something. One required $2 million, the other required zero, and the one that requires zero is faster and obviously saves more money and comes up with a better result. So execution ideas are a subset of ideas.
I think it's actually brilliant. I sent this to a couple people that I know that went bankrupt back in the day. And because what I realized is, ideas basically are just sales pitches. They're like sales pitches to you. They're sales pitches to somebody else.
That's
There's
a great
also
way to think about them.
Yeah, they're like sales pitches to the universe that you still have this ability to cognitively get yourself out of whatever situation you're in. And I use them now, which people think is weird. But like, for instance, I met Vivek Ramaswamy at an event we were both speaking at. And it was like right before he was getting kind of pretty famous for, being a serious presidential contender. And I remember, because I now do this idea practice in a different way than you, but inspired by you, that I was like, I want to be of service to this guy. I kind of want to get to know him. I like knowing different presidential candidates that I've gotten to know over the year. I think it's like an interesting type of human.
By the way, now you know me. I'm running for president. So
there we go.
Sorry again to interrupt, but if you just go to fec.gov and fill out 10 minutes worth of paperwork, you too could be an official candidate for president.
I didn't even look at this. This is an idea right now. Didn't you also try to buy Greenland at some point and get shut down?
Yeah. So I was doing a couple of different experiments there, but I saw how Trump had tweeted he wants to buy Greenland.
That's what it
was. And the Prime Minister of Denmark, for some reason, tweeted back, "It's not for sale." And I'm like, what the hell just happened here? Did a president of the United States just offer to buy a country on Twitter? And then Denmark, which is this tiny little country, they said no. What do they have to do with Greenland? So it kind of forced me to research, why anybody would want Greenland. It turns out Greenland and China are the only places you could find all these rare earth minerals. And so I figured, and I wanted to experiment with my writing a little bit. So I did an article in the form of a Kickstarter. I made a Kickstarter to buy Greenland, and they kicked me off. But then Indiegogo, I think, let me do it. And I started raising like thousands of dollars. It was an interesting way to write about why I would want to do it. And you could become a duke if you can give me $100 and we'll get a holiday after you. If you give $1,000 and you get an acre, if you give more, and so on. And so they started raising thousands of dollars, but then Indiegogo shut it down because they said, look, we know you're just joking around. We don't want to pay back the, we're eating the American Express card fees. So we don't want to do that.
I remember that. I actually thought that was brilliant. Yeah. One of my friends worked in the energy department for Donald Trump, actually. And he left after they didn't get reelected and started a rare earth minerals fund, actually.
Oh, wow.
With this exact reason that, we really don't own these in any way that makes sense, and we're not allowed to mine them here because of all these environmental reasons, et cetera. And so, it's a small world.
And by the way, there's a company, I think it's called Greenland Mineral Resources. And so you think, Greenland's trying to monetize their rare earth minerals. No, they sold all the rights to their mining to China. And so people don't realize that this is like a big geopolitical issue because we need rare earth minerals to power the electric grid, among many other things. And so what happens when you do these experiments and have these ideas is you go on these little mini adventures that even years later are still stories, and you learn valuable information.
Yeah, well, that's the exact thing. I ended up, when I met Vivek, I was like, the thing is, you seem really smart. I like you better than many of the other candidates that are out there. But your social media is awful. And so I just started writing down all these ideas for how he could change his social media. And I gave it to him by the end of the thing. And he was like, can you fly out and talk to my team about how to do this? I was like, I guess so. I was like, he's like, do we pay you for this? I'm like, no, I definitely don't do this for a living. But yeah, sure, I'll fly out and come meet your team. And now we've gotten to know their team because of it. But it was all because of your idea of, what if I just give ideas to other people that I think are interesting and I see if magic happens? And I think that is a beautiful way to go from broke to really abundant.
And by the way, you did two key things there. First off, you didn't charge. Like, you should absolutely not charge for, if someone just wants to meet or if someone wants you to share your ideas with their team, just go out and you build up so much goodwill. There's zero goodwill if they just pay you, because then it's a transaction. Then they think, I paid $500 or $5,000 or even $50,000. No sweat. I don't even have to think about this again. But if you're giving for free, you're still on there. You're still having a communication with them that's non-transactional. Second, a lot of people think, they're going to steal my ideas. I better get it, get this trademarked or whatever, or a patent on my ideas. And that's so stupid because, first off, no one really wants to steal your ideas. In 99.999% of the cases, no one could give a shit about your ideas. The other thing is that, even if they do steal your ideas, you're the idea part. You're abundant in ideas. You're going to come up with more ideas. Them stealing ideas just validates your. In all this time, I've only had one person steal any idea I had that was worth any money, and no big deal. And it's just I'll give an example. Google gives that's their business, is they give ideas away for free all day long, billions of times a day. You go to Google and say, tell me something about motorcycles. Google literally replies, look, we don't know anything about motorcycles, but here are 10 other places that we think are the best places where you can learn about motorcycles. Get out of here, knock yourself out, read about motorcycles. And Google measures its success, how fast you leave to go to one of the recommendations. But then where do you go back the next time you need help? Google. That's how they built a $1 trillion business.
It's such a good point. The other thing that I think you've been masterful at is, you go through these periods of hardships, but then you seemingly totally reinvent yourself. Like, I recall that you lived in a hotel for a couple of years, very like Jack Kerouac of you. But it wasn't the Chelsea Hotel, was it? Did you?
Yeah, the Chelsea Hotel.
Get out. Isn't that where Arthur Miller, after he broke up with Marilyn Monroe?
Yeah, Marilyn Monroe. Yeah. Yeah, when I left graduate school and moved to New York City, I loved the building. It was the oldest hotel in New York, built in 1884, and it's just a beautiful architecture. And you go inside, and there's like artwork everywhere. But it was really a gross hotel. Like, it was disgusting. Like, you go like
on the inside.
On the inside, yeah. Like, one time I was walking down the stairs with my then 5-year-old daughter, and she actually slipped on the stairs on a condom. On a used condom.
Oh, that's so New York in the 70s.
Yeah, and this was like, just a few years ago, really. But then there was a period where I didn't want to deal with rent, and I didn't want to own a house. I didn't want to deal with rent, and I didn't even want to deal with hotels. So I just lived from Airbnb to Airbnb for a couple of years. So again, I think doing experiments when you can is a fun way to live, where you learn about yourself and you come up with different types of ideas, and you have something to write about, and it's just interesting. It's a fun way to live. You can't always live from Airbnb to Airbnb, but there's always experiments you can do.
Well, I mean, theoretically, you could if you go to really cheap ones too, because that might be cheaper than a lot of the ways people live. We did this interesting little tweet the other day that I think you're exactly right. There's like seems to be this idea of, well, if you can become an idea machine, and then there's also some power of experimentation. So just what can you try to do from an action perspective? But then there's also this power of place and like, can you move your physical body, which you've done a ton of times. And we tweeted out the other day, so I couldn't think of somebody who had never once left their hometown for like an extended period of time, meaning even college, and become what would be determined as like monetarily career focused, successful, like quite successful. And we had thousands of replies. You know what Twitter is. It's like, you elitist, blah, blah, blah. But all these people, I'm like, show me who. They're like, Warren Buffett. I'm like, wrong. New York, and went to school outside of Omaha. Like, again and again, couldn't find anybody. And then I found one guy, Nathan Barry, who I'm friends with, who runs ConvertKit, that's like, yeah, I went to school locally for college. I've never left. The longest I've ever been away from my home is 4 weeks. But besides that, I couldn't find somebody. So do you also think there's something to the fact of like, when you're struggling, like move physically during the day, but also maybe move place?
Yeah, I think that's true. I never thought of it that way, but you do have to, let's say we don't really, self-awareness is something that's very low for most people for good reason. Like, there's no reason for us to really know who we are. We usually see ourselves through how other people see us. So maybe there's something to the point where if you go to other locations, now you have much more variety of how people see you, and plus you learn as well by seeing how the rest of the world is. Plus, it's just fun. It's like every time you go someplace, it's an adventure. You can make an adventure out of it. And I always like to think of myself as trying to find mini quests to pursue. So a quest is different than a goal, and it's different than a journey. A quest might be like something that's impossible, like me buying Greenland. But okay, I'm going to figure out a way to begin this quest, and along the way, I'm going to have adventures. Now, that one was a very quick quest that failed, that I had a mini adventure with. But let's say for about 6 years, I tried to be a real serious stand-up comedian. Like, I was performing 6 nights a week, twice a night, and I even owned part of a comedy club during this time. And then I ended up traveling all over the country, all over the world. Like, I toured around the Netherlands, for instance, and what an adventure. And then I stopped. Like, that was it. I got to where I wanted to, and it wasn't fun for me anymore. But having those kind of quests always shows you who you are a little bit.
I really like that. I haven't thought about that way. So it's almost like an experiment, an adventure, a quest. There's sort of levels to the game. But I actually think you had the best thing ever happen with Greenland. It's like, best case scenario, you show yourself to be an asymmetric thinker. You get a ton of attention and press. You raise awareness to this issue. You probably get a bunch of connections that you never thought of. I bet you got a bunch of emails and social media subscribers, and then you didn't have to deal with actually running Greenland. And so exactly. That might have been a win,
Yeah, and the worst case is, right, like, so all those things you mentioned were like worst case, plus I get a story to tell. Plus, for me, it started off as I wanted to experiment with writing. Like you write your newsletter once a week. It's not always easy to write and to build style. And it's writing because everybody could write. They just open up, their LinkedIn account and they write a story. Everybody thinks they're a writer, but it's a hard skill. And so one way to experiment is you write an article in the second person, like you use the word you, instead of I. Or another way is to write in the form of letters, like, I'm going to write an article that's me and Codie Sanchez writing letters back and forth to each other. But here now I wrote an article essentially that was in the form of a Kickstarter campaign. So it's like you get to play and improve as a writer and an artist as well.
It's so true. When we do videos now, because we do a lot of YouTubes, we think about idea and format, which is basically what you're talking about. So you can have ideas on like, okay, the topic is Greenland. The format is Kickstarter story about it, or the format is we're going to travel there and we're going to do a Discovery Channel version. And so it's fascinating how there's so many versions of ideas. I really like that. Speaking of that, you have you basically turned this movement of ideation into an app, right? Note PD.
Yeah, notepd.com, notepad.com. But I have to say, despite the fact that over the years so many people have said, "Oh, you should build this as an app," I would use it. You could never believe what people tell you they would use. So but somebody contacted me and offered to build this. So I said yes. And I'm proud of it. It's got like a couple thousand users, but it doesn't really grow. And I think an important lesson there really is that when someone says something positive, it actually has no informational value. Like there could be a lot of reasons why someone says, sure, I would buy your product, or I would use this concept, or build it and then I'll pay for it. But they could be saying that for a lot of reasons. One is they could like the idea, but they don't really know themselves and they're not really going to use it. The other thing is they could be like, oh, I just want to say yes to this guy's idea so he goes away, and so on. But if you're building a business, no has real informational value. Like if you buy a laundromat and someone across the street says, nah, I'm not going to use that laundromat, that person has some valuable information for you, as opposed to, sure, I'll use that laundromat. I've never used it before, but I'll use it. That has zero informational content. But no has a lot of information in it.
Yeah, I always say no and dough. Those are the only two things I listen to. Opinions really have no value. You're exactly right. I always giggle. I went and talked the other day to this University of Texas little tiny class here. And they were talking about validation of ideas. And they're like, well, we went out, we asked other people what we thought. And so then we determined if we should do X, Y, or Z. I'm like, but did you get the cash? They told you they were going to do it? That doesn't mean anything. How often do you lie? 400 times a day to yourself. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm not going to eat that donut. I am going to make $1 million a year, but you don't. I mean, we're kind of like self-rationalizing machines. And it turns out we don't actually in-person face-to-face, maybe on Twitter, but in-person face-to-face, we don't really want to tell somebody else their baby's ugly. It's not that fun.
No, it's true. And that's why, when you have a business idea, I call it smoking crack bias. Like you always have to ask yourself every day, am I smoking crack? Is this really a good idea, or am I just completely insane right now? Because I've seen so many friends who I haven't been able to tell them that their idea is bad because I don't want to hurt their feelings, even though that is the proper thing to do, is to be as honest as possible. But I would say to myself, I can't believe this guy thinks this is a good idea. This is the worst idea I've ever seen. And it's very hard to avoid that bias.
Yeah. Hysterical. Smoking crack bias. I'm going to use that and ask the team. I'm going to ask both the team if they're smoking crack frequently and myself. Equal opportunity.
Yeah. And find out when's there a time when you've been smoking crack, so you start to learn to recognize when you might be. Because it's hard to know.
Yeah, this one I haven't wordsmithed enough to do it on Twitter, but I always giggle when people talk about, I get in front of the mirror and I say positive affirmations to myself, like you're good looking, you're strong, people like you. I'm like, I actually think what would be better is you get in front of the mirror and you go, you're super mid, you're kind of average like everybody else, and so you're gonna have to work pretty hard. And then it keeps motivating you. Every time I see people shout positive affirmations, I'm like, I'm not sure. You're just kind of misleading yourself to think you don't have to work as hard as you probably do.
Right. I think it's really important to embrace mediocrity, embrace where you're mediocre, and then work on it, all the areas where you're mediocre, to at least improve a little bit. But it's really hard because if you are in a pattern of mediocrity, which everybody is basically, it's really hard to improve. So it's a challenge. But if you think you're great, how many people in the world have been great? We always say, oh, Winston Churchill was great. Was he? I don't know. This guy had a lot of problems too. And Abraham Lincoln, had a lot of problems. And George Washington had slaves. So everybody is either bad or mediocre at best.
and varies by the day, you know? Yeah. I think one of the best ways to not have trolls, which is kind of what I want to roll out, or to not care as much about the trolls, is like to beat them to the punch. They're like, you're dumb. You're like, yep. You know? Yeah, sure. I'm wrong all the time. But you have this quote that I love that's like, no matter who you are, no matter what you do, no matter who your audience is, 30% will love it, 30% will hate it, 30% won't care. Stick with the people who love you and don't spend a single second on the rest. Life will be better that way. Are you actually able to do that now?
No. I think when I wrote that, I really wanted to believe that about myself, that I would not care, but I do care. And I've written, you know, so I've been writing almost daily for like over 20 years. At first, mostly financial stuff, but then much more personal stuff and more opinions and so on. And sometimes I've had really, like, for whatever reason, people will get upset at me and I would have severe backlashes. And then the last one happened in August 2020, where the backlash lasted for months. And it was, I'm not exaggerating, like over 1 million people like lashed out at me. And many more people liked what I was saying, but 1 million people, including people I cared about, were like saying really bad things about me. And it really, I mean, even Jerry Seinfeld wrote an op-ed in the New York Times just trashing me, which then Andrew Cuomo emailed to like everybody in New York State. And it really hurt my feelings. And I got a little depressed over it. And because I had friends who I could see were liking his article and quotes about his article. And it just really upset me for a while. Yeah. And that kind of slowed down my writing. It was the first thing which in 20 years slowed down my writing, and I kind of switched quests for a while. And it was painful to I'm still, I think, recovering from that.
I remember when that happened. I think you've been vindicated, a lot of your statements in 2020. The problem is, you actually said this too, I think. The problem is when you were right, nobody will ever tell you. But when you were wrong, they'll remind you a lot. And I think that is true. You have had a lot of takes that were unpopular then that you're now like, how's the math? You know, it aged well. You had this one tweet. We can cut this out if you don't want this in here later. But I was giggling my little titties off as I was reading it this morning, which was, I still think it's funny, Alyssa Milano writing, do you know that Joe Rogan has double the viewers that I do on his podcast? And you just wrote, can you believe you have a podcast? And I just, because the hubris from some of these people, like, yeah, Joe Rogan's that aged well. Like, that was a tweet that aged well, but I bet you got a bunch of hate from it. And somehow the hate is so much louder than all the love.
Yeah, it is. Like, you know, it's just like in marriage, like one negative interaction with your spouse, you know, you have to have like 6 positive interactions. I forget what research says this, but you have to have 6 positive interactions to make up for it. And it's the same thing with, if like the mistake you can make is thinking that Twitter is important and that people's reactions on Twitter is important, and that it's nothing more than just a place to like make some fun tweets and laugh about it. And also it's a vehicle for building a platform, like to drive people towards a newsletter and so on. But like when you start like there was this period in 2020 when I had written this article about New York City where I was trying to argue with all the 1 million people who were arguing with me on Twitter. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. That's not what I said. And why was I doing that to people with anonymous names who were just like, well, you're from Iowa. Why should we listen to you? And I'm like, no, I'm not from Iowa. I was born and raised in New York City. So like, why would I be even responding to them? But I was.
Yeah. No, it's always better to not, but it's really hard too, because your trolls are also your biggest fans. Like, I have one guy that I think like 1 out of every 5 of his tweets is like something negative about me. And it's actually a little funny because I have a rule now. I don't feed the trolls. I like don't comment on their stuff. I just
that's key.
Let people doing shit, don't have time for people talking shit. And we're 2 different groups of people, and never the two shall collide. And but I had this one guy, I thought it was a great response. He basically was saying something like, you know, Codie Sanchez is not the real deal. She doesn't know anything about buying businesses. You know, she sucks. And so I see that and I go click. And this was early. I didn't have that many followers. I go click on his profile and I see that he's like a house flipper or something. And I'm like, first of all, what the fuck does this guy know about buying businesses? I've been doing this for, 10 years. So I get all of my ego. And then I go and I respond. And I thought it was funny at the time, but my response was, I hope you own more real estate in real life than I own rent-free in your head. Otherwise, boy, do I have a course to sell you. And so
That's
I
great.
thought I was funny. Now, when I look back on it, I'm like, you know, that guy's he's probably gone through a tough time. One of his business was probably struggling. You know, he lashed out at me because something that I said that triggered him in some way. And like, the truth of the matter is, why do I have to be rude back to this person? I'm just going to like wish you well. I hope life's good. And, you know, and then save myself from like all the crazy stuff this guy DMs me and like a potential stalker who's going to try to murder me, you know?
Yeah. And not only that, you lend your completely legitimate, valid audience to him for that tweet.
Exactly.
And so he can now use that audience for his purpose. That certainly wasn't your intent. So that's why now I'm very careful about, like, every time I click reply and I even like type something out and then I realize, you know what? Do I really want to lend my audience to this person? And I always then get rid of the tweet. But now but at that point though, I was responding to everyone because I thought like everybody I knew was also like trolling me. And it was like a sensitive topic that most people agreed. But the other thing about trolls is that for every one troll you have, it means you have 100 people who love what you're doing. But the trolls have to express themselves for some reason. The people who love what you're doing are like normal, sane people who just go on with their lives. But the trolls stop everything they're doing and they're like, I have to say something rude and hateful to Cody in order to move on with my life. And those are trolls. So
Yeah. And they live under bridges for a reason. But and I think Twitter just brings out that in humans and obviously brought it out in me too. So that's my karma. That's when I realized that I'm not going to do that anymore because, I don't need crazies in my life. But I think it's really, first of all, I didn't know that's one of the reasons why you slowed down writing, because I think your writing is really prolific. And what does my opinion matter? But, especially somebody from Hollywood, man, like, I don't know, Jerry Seinfeld, I'm sure he's great, but those fucking people telling any of us what to do is hysterical to me. I'm like, the thing is, you get paid to lie and pretend you're a character for a living. So no bias at all, and no basis for you to chat. But I hope you keep writing again because people actually will learn. Like, here's the other thing, James, that I giggle about. Dude, that guy. So we're humans are weird. So if somebody reads your stuff and they read James Altucher like I did, and then they go take action on what you do, you can change somebody's life, right? You can literally make them tons of money. The upside's actually completely limitless. And you can give them habits and tools that will make their life better that day. But if instead you teach them to laugh and give them a hangover, you're applauded continuously. And so it's we humans are hysterical in that way.
Yeah, it's like, particularly like all these actors who are commenting on like geopolitical events, like what made them first of all, what makes anyone qualified to comment on geopolitical events? But probably the least thing is an ability to pretend to be someone else. So it doesn't make any sense. But they do influence people. And then suddenly you see like this like, onslaught of people who, if this person said it, then it's okay to say it out loud publicly. And then suddenly it unleashes like a whole new violent attack against you if they said something against you. But yeah, I hope I write again as well. Like what happened is I said, you know what, I'm going to take. It just I didn't make a conscious decision, but I decided, when I was younger, like 30 years ago, 25 years ago, I was a tournament playing ranked chess master. And I think after a 25-year break, I'm going to go on a quest and I'm going to be as good 25 years later as I was then. And this will be a quick and easy quest. It'll be fun. And it's been actually really hard. Like aging actually does affect you. And we do actually get old. I didn't realize it actually is true that we get older as time goes on. And this has been an ongoing quest, and it has slowed down my writing.
Yeah.
But it's improved me in other ways. Like I've been all over the world now playing chess. I've had dinner with the world chess champion. I've been writing for the premier chess magazine in the world because they heard I was doing this. I've had lessons from the world memory champion. I've talked to nutritionists, brain psychologists, chess coaches, and everything. It's been an amazing a bunch of adventures.
Yeah, you have an ability to turn difficulties into upsides that I think is really cool for you to share. If you haven't listened to the Theo Von, Dana White podcast, it's great.
Oh, no, I haven't. I've listened to Theo Von's podcast. I haven't listened to this specific one.
Yeah, it's a new one. But Dana White has like the ultimate I give zero fuck energy, I think. But he went through all of it during COVID too. Obviously, people hated a lot of stuff that he did. So, James, you're the man. Thank you so much for coming on and doing this.
Thanks for having me on.
Fun.
I'm glad we were able to work this out.
Same, 7 years later. Also, where do you like people to go these days?
I like people to listen to the podcast interview I did with Codie Sanchez. So this is perfect right here.
Okay, the James.
They should just listen to this over and over again. Is listen to your podcast interview of me.
Perfect. We'll just loop it back and forth. Thanks, James.
Welcome back to the Big Deal Podcast. I'm Codie Sanchez, and this is for those of us who want to be not just rich, but free and do what it takes to get there. This week, we are talking about how to not be fucking broke if you are, and how to break a cycle of poverty for yourself and maybe for the country overall. But we'll start with just you. So do me a huge solid. And if we taught you something, give us a little love. That's how we spread this message. All right. Appreciate you. We thought long and hard about this. I got a ton of questions. And Michaela, I want to answer your question about how to not be broke because this one touched me. So she said, I made some bad decisions when younger, and now my debt repayments each month crush me. No space for savings or investment. Forget any fun spending. Just being able to buy family birthday gifts is a stretch. My partner and I already launched a business we believe in and we're working really hard, but I see no future and everything creates constant tension for me. How do I get out of this? We're going to break this down in 3 ways. We first thought, okay, in order to change something, you 1, have to acknowledge that a problem exists. Then you 2, have to define what the problem is. Then you 3, have to set the landscape of what the situation you are surrounded with is. And as soon as you do those 3 things, then you can start getting into tactics on how to change. But without hitting those 3 aspects, you can't. And so that's what we're going to go into this week. I think we should define broke, right? Because Tanner basically, who's sitting over here, you can't see him. Tanner said, wouldn't it be helpful to define broke? Because a lot of people feel broke, but they aren't broke. A lot of people are broke, but they don't feel broke. And so I started thinking about, okay, what is the definition of broke? How would I define that? And I don't think it's exactly monetary. How I define broke is this: being 1 negative event away from running out of money to live, eat, and survive. Being 1 negative event away from running out of money. And if we think about being broke that way, a lot of people are broke in this country and around the world. I think you should kind of lay the landscape for them really quick on other humans in America who are also broke. So you know you're not alone. It's actually relatively normal. And I think there are ways that we can help you get out of it.
First, Tanner had a great step before I even jump into that, talking about median savings balance. And this does not include retirement funds of Americans under 35. That number is 3,240. So that is something to just keep in mind.
So the average American has like $3,000 in the bank. That's it.
Under 35, $3,000, not including their retirement, correct?
Wild.
And to understand that, the median American worker earns an estimated $54,000 a year, and that's according to the Census Bureau in 2022.
So we now know the normal American, and really important that we use median, not average, because average you can skew really easily with really, really rich people. So the average American makes about $50,000 a year and has about $3,000 in savings if they're 35. Then we started to think, okay, there's 3 tiers to poverty, right? There's 1, where do we start? What's like the kid level of poverty? Then there's 2, current state, like me and you, where are we at? And then there's 3, elderly, like where are we going? And so we've broken down current state, right? So where we are at today, you're going to go to kids, and then we're going to go to elderly. And then after we hit that, we're going to go to what's the solution? How the do we get out of poverty?
Let's talk about adults that are poor. So in 2015, 18.2% of the U.S. adult population, which comes to a little bit over 43 million Americans, provided unpaid care to an adult relative. So why are people becoming broke? Not only is it really expensive to have a kid, but adults are now taking care of their parents. This is an extreme issue. Like, poverty is really killing adults. So for people over the age of 15 in America, in the year 2019, there were around 200,000 deaths that were attributed to poverty. Backing up, talking about parents again, So unless your parents are rich, the elderly really aren't here to save you. Baby boomers are going to be leaving behind trillions of dollars in assets to heirs. And total family wealth in the US has tripled from $38 trillion in 1989 to $140 trillion in 2022. Sorry, that even took me a second to even say, because I was like, wait, is that wrong?
That's a lot of pennies.
Like, that is insane.
Yep.
So we're seeing all that money getting moved to American adults. Only the 1% will really be seeing like a majority of this money. And the bottom 50% of Americans are only going to see 8% of those transfers.
You hear the term generational wealth transfer. We're amongst one of the largest generational wealth transfers in history, we think. Small issue. Most of that wealth is going to get transferred to the top 1%. And if you're in the bottom 50%, you're going to get about 8% of that. If you're expecting that because a bunch of baby boomers are going to retire, you're going to win, looks like that's often not the case. And again, this isn't making you out to be a victim. I wouldn't take these stats and think, woe is me. Now I'm going to go complain about it and I'm going to do sad TikToks. That's not the point. It's that we understand the landscape so that we can change it for ourselves. So now let's talk about kids real quick.
So a kindergartner from the bottom 25% of socioeconomic status with the top test scores of the 25% range has a 31% chance of earning a college degree and a job that makes more than $35,000 by the age of 25 and $45,000 by the age of 35. In the same vein, a kindergartner from the top 25% of socioeconomic status with the bottom 25% test scores has a 71% chance of achieving that same milestone. So that basically means that if you were born into a poor family, you have way less of a chance of getting a college degree and making more money, even if you're smarter than your peers that were maybe born into a higher socioeconomic status. And by the way, this data is coming from NCES, and it analyzed standardized math tests and different socioeconomic statuses.
Okay, so basically the thing we already knew, the thing you knew in your gut, which is that if you look around and you don't have much money, and other people that you know don't have much money, your future likely looks the same. It's harder than we thought, perhaps, to break out, according to the data. So now if we know that, we know if we want to be better than what the average person is, we have to do something that is different than what the average person will do. And, I want you guys to kind of think about this for a moment, let it sink in, understand the difficulty, and then realize that we are going to have tools to change a bunch of this. So this isn't like, slit your wrist time. It's going to get a little bit better. All right, let's hit them with the last one, which is like the ones that horrified me the most, the stats on the elderly.
So 73% of consumers die in debt.
Think about that for a second. That's 7 out of 10 Americans die not with zero, but with less than zero, like $61,000 in debt on average, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
not good.
46% of Americans die without $10,000 in savings.
Yeah. So on average, we're dying without a lot of cash to leave behind, which is okay. Hey, you spend it all, you max it all out. But perhaps if we want to leave a legacy, we need to do something different. Some of the stats that I thought were helpful as I went to reframe this is to realize that most people who become millionaires, more than 76% of them, actually inherited nothing, $0. And so if we can reverse engineer what these people did, then we can be the, 30% that aren't those that die without a lot of cash. And so I think we should go now into how do you break out of a cycle of being broke or poor? And there was like one quote I thought we'd start with Dave Ramsey, which is, don't take money advice from broke people. And I love this quote. And I think you should question everything you get asked on the internet or you get told on the internet, even me. And so a lot of times if we're hanging out with certain people, and those certain people don't have the things that we want, we get their advice by default, right? You're hanging out with a group of friends and they might say things to you like, yeah, well, why don't you take that job right now? I don't know if you can get any better. Well, why don't you come hang out with us on the weekend? You're no fun anymore. Well, I have plenty of time for my friends and you don't have any time for your friends. And what I want you to do is realize that anybody who does not have a life that you want and a bank account that looks interesting to you is not somebody that you are going to go to for advice. You can give them love. You can give them time, but you do not need to take their advice. And I want to tell you this because the road to not being the median American is going to be hard. And so what I'm going to talk to you about and what I am actually responding to is this message right here from Michaela. I wanted to look her in the eye and say, if I was you, what would I do to change my situation? How could I break the cycle of poverty with almost 100% likelihood of doing it?
How could I not be another statistic that dies broke and or worse, that dies in debt? How could I, in the next 3 to 9 years, become completely financially free? And this is my answer to you, Michaela. Here's what it looks like. There's 2 paths. I'm going to lay them out for you. 2 paths that I see that are the most straightforward way to break the cycle of poverty. Path number 1, I'm first going to say, I assume you have no skill. And by no skills, you probably have some skills, but if you had a lot of skills, you would be compensated for them. Most people who have high-level, in-demand skills make a lot of money, period, end of story. If you are not compensated right now, it means that you do not have a skill set that is highly sought after. And if you did have that highly sought after skill set, you would never want for money again. And so path number 1 is going to be skill accumulation. And we're going to accumulate a skill that people don't talk about anymore, which is a skill in the trades. Basically, if you're watching online, you can look at the list of these, but Rachel did a bunch of analysis and pulled what are the highest paying skilled labor jobs out there. And they're jobs that aren't sexy. These aren't TikToking jobs, but they're jobs in engineering. They're jobs in things like mechanical engineering. They're jobs in things like electricians. And this group of people followed one path. And the path is essentially this. You, for the next 2 years, anywhere from 6 to 24 months, are going to focus on getting one trade in any of these positions. And these positions all pay somewhere in the realm of $75,000 to $200,000 a year. List out for them really quick. Rachel, what are some of the positions that we found?
Some of the top paying trade positions are elevator mechanic, power plant operator, radiation therapist, nuclear medicine technician, and dental hygienist. And these all make over $75,000 a year, with that top one, elevator mechanic, making almost $100,000 a year, according to Credit Karma.
And here's what I want you to take on. These jobs are not going to be something your friends are going to be excited about. They're nothing that you're probably going to want to brag about. They're not something that we as a society have said is cool. But guess what? The average marketing degree after graduating college makes $37,000 a year. And yet we think that we could say we're a marketing exec and that sounds great. That is not going to break your cycle of poverty. Your cycle of poverty gets broken when you accumulate a set of skills that is so desired that people come after you. You do not have to chase after the jobs. So you're going to spend the next 6 to 24 months in a trade school. You're going to work harder than you have before. You're going to work longer than you have before. And you're going to not make very much money for the next 6 to 24 months. It's going to be pretty miserable. And at the end of that 24 months, you are going to leave with something so precious, yet so few people pursue it. You are going to leave with a skill that no one can ever take from you. If you left this country today and you were ejected into a third world country, they are going to need people who are mechanical engineers still. They are going to need people who understand electricity. They are going to need people to fix their teeth and to be their doctor. No one can take that skill from you. Even if they take every single dollar that you have, they can never take that skill. And so path 1 will be, you will do what the many will not do, which is you will obsess on a skill that is highly sought after, but maybe not sexy. And after 6 to 24 months, you will start making somewhere between $75,000 and let's call it $150,000. And as you do that over a series of years, you will then apply all the practices we're going to talk about on this podcast for increasing your wealth and keeping the money that you make. But you will start by breaking the cycle of poverty and becoming part of the, let's call it top 10% earners in the US, which is somewhere between 75 to 150K. Most people will spend their life as a check cashier or working as a bank teller or working in a manual labor position and not accumulating a skill. You will not be most people. You will change that. That's path 1. Now, path 2 is a little bit riskier in some ways. Path 2 is you are going to find a job that is not an hourly pay, that rewards your ability to execute. That's really important, that it is a job that is not hourly, that rewards your ability to execute. And what does that mean? It's a job like sales. For every additional outcome that you have that's positive, you get an additional dollar in your bank account. Your money is not tied just to your time, it's tied to your outcome. And here's what you're going to do. When you choose this job, it requires less skills. You do not have to go to a trade school for 16 to 24 months. You can go today and get a sales job where you get on the phone, where you get on emails, where you go and knock on doors, and you can do these next 7 steps. The first step you're going to do is you're going to apply to jobs until you get one of these. Then as soon as you get in the job, you're going to find the number 1 top performer at the company that you work at. You are going to study them like a lab rat.
And you are going to do every single thing that top performer does that you're capable of. And then you're going to do the third step, which is more. You're going to first mimic the things you can see, which are you're going to get in earlier than them. You're going to stay later than them. You're going to spend less time on social media than them. You're going to work after hours at home on learning more than they do. You're going to skip a bunch of fun, and you are going to put a bunch of focus into growing your funds. And you're going to do that for 1 to 3 years in this job. And all you are going to obsess on is learning and earning again and again and again. And you're going to stay in that job until you have maximized your earning potential and you have maximized your learning potential. And then at about year 2 or 3, you're going to plateau and you're going to have learned and earned almost as much as you can in that position. And you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to go to your boss and you're going to ask them for a promotion where you have more responsibilities, more work, more ability to earn, more ability to learn. And if they don't give it to you, you're going to go to a new job because the average salary increase is about 3% if you stay at the same company. And yet if you job hop, it can be anywhere from 30 to 200% increase. So you're going to go to the next place. And then what are you going to do when you get to the next place? You're going to obsess on the top performer at that job. And you are going to work longer, harder, and you're going to learn more until you supersede them in the next 3 years. And after anywhere from 3 to 9 years, you are going to have learned, earned, and accumulated enough money that you will have broken the cycle of poverty for you. And given some of the statistics that Rachel talked about, you may have broken the cycle of poverty for your family and your kids. And you can do that inside of 3 to 9 years. The problem is most people will not dedicate the front loading of pain, and so they suffer a lifetime of pain. If you are willing to sacrifice 3 to 9 years to a lot of hard work, you can live 50 years without the constant strain, tension, and pain that comes with being broke and being really poor. And I know this firsthand because my very first job, I made about $37,000 a year at Vanguard. And I climbed my way through a bunch of positions at Vanguard until I had a job where every call that I made and every increase in sales that I had led to more money for me. And the second that they told me that I couldn't earn more and that I couldn't be promoted, I started looking for new jobs. And then I went to Goldman Sachs. And at Goldman Sachs, I found a place where they paid you for performance to the maximum. And I kept working at Goldman Sachs until they wouldn't promote me. And once they told me that they wouldn't promote me and I'd have to wait here for a year, I went and found my next job at State Street. And at State Street, I looked at the top performer, I looked them in the eye and I said, I'm going to do more than you. And at State Street, I continued to grind until I beat that person. And then I left State Street when I finally wanted to get my own skin in the game and run part of my own company. And that took just about, let's call it 8 years for me to do that. And by the end of that 8-year period, I was financially free and I would never have to work for anybody ever again. I knew nothing about finance in the beginning. I had no idea what a mutual fund was. I had no savings. In fact, I had negative savings. And I often had that terrible sinking feeling where your debit card is your worst enemy because you know that it's going to be out of money so frequently. And at the end of that 8-year period, that was never going to be me again, even through a financial crisis. So you can do the exact same thing if you are willing to front load pain. And all these things that you see on the internet now about people investing to make money and people skipping the grind, it's not true. The only truth is if you front load pain, you will eventually have a lifetime of gain because making money compounds, but it only compounds if you start and if you do the hard work up front. There's no other way around it.
I also wanted to say that you had a great tweet that was basically like a TLDR of this. Path to your first $100,000. Get a job that pays more if you do more. Mimic everything the top performer does. Get in early, stay late until you can't possibly earn or learn more. Then apply for a higher paying job. And I feel like that just feels kind of like the cherry on top having that.
Yeah, it's not like a fun diatribe, because I think everybody wants a little bit of an easy button to life. But the cool thing about it is pretty simple. It's not easy. It sucks to work long hours. Like it sucks to not see the sun for 6 months. But at the end of it, it's totally doable. And I think that's the one cool thing about working in America is like, this is all so possible. This place is crazy in many ways, but we super reward hard work. That part I think makes a ton of sense. Okay, well, one, I think if you guys haven't read the How to Get Rich from Naval Ravikant, tweet thread. It's incredible. We'll link it in the show notes. That whole thing is full of so much wisdom. The only thing I'll say about the Naval thread is it's like so theoretical. It's so beautiful.
The more purpose-driven I am ultimately makes me the best husband I can possibly be. Besides a very, very, very tiny fraction of the entire populace, we're all replaceable.
Hey, and welcome back. It's Codie Sanchez, and this is the Big Deal Podcast for those who don't just want to be rich, but be free and do what it actually takes to get there. Okay, today I have a treat for you. This is a long-form interview with a real man in, dare I say, a world of boys who's become a friend, Mike Chandler. So he's a UFC fighter. He won the Bellator championship 3 times, slated to fight Conor McGregor, and also oddly one of the nicest humans I've ever had the pleasure to become friends with. Now, Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. And Mike and I joked about that because it turns out that's true. And it's useful kind of to talk to those who have been repeatedly face punched and still keep their demons in their mind at bay. So you should listen to this if you want to be more mentally strong, you wonder how to take control of a life and a childhood that was hard, you wonder what it's like to be inside the mind of a champion, and you want to have it all, like an incredible career, a six-pack, beautiful wife and children, like he does. So I think we should get into it. What do you think?
I completely agree. And before we even jump into stuff, I feel like you should read something that you wrote the other day.
So here's my contrarian idea. I think sometimes you need a story to tell yourself when life is hard, when you're losing, and you don't even want to get out of bed. And so I wrote this to remind myself of that. It's the dark of the night. My alarm says 12:44 a.m., but my brain says sleep no more. The world outside is loud, pounding, insatiable, and it will not settle. A running to-do list races through my mind, marching like incessant ants in a line. Then I remember every army needs a general. So I throw off the covers and relegate sleep to a future self. We've got work to do. God gave us a body filled with capacity, a horde straining to break free. Better use it. The coffee pot whistles happily, thrilled at being used for its true capacity. Happy to have an early friend to start the day. My pen traces paper, taking ideas out of my head and onto the one place where they can't slip away from me so easily. It's quiet. No emails coming in, no pings, just me in the night. That feeling of purpose, of execution, of getting done flows through me. I'm convinced there's no greater sensation than creating exactly what you should. The architect drafting his building, the brick mason laying his final cornerstone, the writer's words to books, the farmer sowing seeds. So this day, this morning, wherever you are, settle not for sleep. See what you are actually capable of. The world is waiting for it. All right. So before we get into Mike, ask yourself, do you have a story so strong it'll pull you out of sleep and complacency? And if you don't, you can steal some of his. I really like this part.
Bring the band in. Let's go.
I think the little man and the everyday man in the US is sort of getting crushed by the big, the big companies, the big banks, the big government. And increasingly there's a nation of men and women who sort of feel purposeless and a little bit powerless. And when I read your story, I was really inspired by the fact that you started and self-proclaimed are a everyday man from a small town who became something a little bit bigger. And so I'd be curious to hear from you in your words. What was that journey like?
Well, I think eventually every big shot is just a small shot that never stops shooting. You just got to keep on going. I was a small guy from a small town. I was taught to do small things. The people I was around, my closest of kin, my closest of community, there wasn't a lot of gumption heading toward the outside of those county lines. It was even a gamble for me to go 2 hours west of me to go to Mizzou and walk on to the University of Missouri wrestling team when everybody said, why are you going to go do that? Why are you going to go ride the bench? Why are you going to go? What if you never wrestle? What if you quit? What if you come back with your hat in your hand and we can all say, I told you so? And I think so many of us have been put into a box, whether it be our upbringing, whether it be the people around us, whether it be our own self-sabotaging self-talk or self-sabotaging vision and view and self-image and self-concept of ourselves. And I still battle that little guy from that little town every single day. He's still inside. I've just got really good at duct taping him to the basement of my mind and continuing to believe that if I work hard, I operate with integrity, if I meet the right people, if I'm nice to and serve the right people, they will in turn serve me, and it will in turn serve me, my greater purpose, my greater mission. And then eventually things will work out. And some days it feels like I'm treading water, and some days it feels like I'm shooting to the moon. But I think that's the essence of our human condition. You're never going to feel 100% happy with where you're at. You're never going to feel 100% like you did every single thing that you needed to do. But all in all, success or growth, becoming the man or woman you're supposed to be on the other side is just a bunch of small decisions every single day, a little bit of hard work every single day that adds up to the big success, you know, and it's worked out well for me. Went from wrestling to mixed martial arts and winning some world titles, and now in the biggest fight I could ever ask for.
It's actually wild because you talk a lot about mental toughness. And in particular, I believe you have a mindset coach, not just a boxing coach and not a growth coach, but a coach that helps you, as you've mentioned, like slay the dragons or lock a dragon in a room that shouldn't be let out. Talk to me about that. Why a mindset coach?
And I've had numerous over the years and specific mentors. And even, you know, we're sitting here at Operation Blackside. I mean, these are the guys that I want to be able to call. I want them to call me when they think, hey, I need something. You know, I want to be like these guys here, like the leaders here. We are the sum total of the people that we hang out with or aspire to be like. And obviously today, the world is so connected because I can just hit follow to a million different people and feel like I'm in their lives. But ultimately, if you're doing something impactful with your life, if you're trying your hardest, if you're operating with integrity, you hold your reputation to a very high regard, then eventually those people start being attracted to you as much as you were attracted to them. I had a mindset coach that I've worked with on and off, and we really did. It wasn't necessarily forward-thinking self-image. How do I get to where I'm going to go? Who am I now? What do I stand for? Who is Michael Chandler? What is my story? What are the lies that I've been telling myself for the last 30-something years? What are the pitfalls that I continue to fall back into, the valleys I continue to fall back into because of the way I see myself, the stories that I've told myself, and what do I stand for? You know, I think a lot of us are wandering generalities instead of meaningful specifics, knowing exactly who we are, what we want to do, and what we want to accomplish. It's okay to embark on a journey with no virtual certainty of success or even close to success or even close to it working out the way we want it to work out. But if we move forward by not knowing exactly who we are and what we stand for, you're kind of just a wandering generality, and it's much harder to get from point A to point B. So for me, it was trying to figure out, who am I? Yeah. You know, who am I when I show up as my wife's husband? Who am I when I show up as my kid's dad? Who am I when I show up in a business meeting? Or who am I when I show up in a cage in front of millions of people? All of those questions can be answered before the actual moment. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of introspection and a lot of writing and a lot of thinking, a lot of visualization. And as you alluded to, I mean, some dragons I've been able to slay, and some of them I've just been really good at pushing into a corner and being able to manage them, being okay with them being there for the rest of my life, knowing that that's a part of my story. It's one of the chains and the links in the chain of this huge life that I'm going to live here on this earth, and just being okay with constant and never-ending improvement, but knowing who I am, what I stand for, who I want to serve, whose I am, and growing every single day.
Yeah, it's funny because every time I embark on a new business venture, I don't usually call them coaches, but a consultant. So like, if I want to start a new business, I want to go to try to hire the best person I can to start that new business. And the same thing if we're struggling in an area, maybe I need a new sales coach. And so, you know, I get them with a call a week and we break down the stuff that I don't know technically how to do. But I think if you would have told me a year ago, Cody, you need a mindset coach, I would have been like, what sort of nonsense is that? Like fluffy, what? And then I would have felt like, oh, I'm going to spend money on that? And you seem like a tough guy, obviously. And yet, did you ever feel that way? Or how did you get past the idea, if you ever had it, that, you know, that might be fluffy, or it's not a coach who's going to teach you how to hook better, or is going to teach you how to do something tactically better?
Well, I think ultimately, every single thing that we do, every single thing that we say, everything that we feel, every single aspect of our life always really does go back to our self-image, our self-concept, how we see ourselves, how deserved are we of success? How deserved are you of even embarking on the next business venture? Who are you to think that these people are going to watch, tune in, buy, want the services, or, you know, what is the story that you're telling yourself? And I think for me, I always had such a lowly view of what I brought to the table that I needed to start doing a lot of work, you know? And so ultimately, whenever that cage door closes and Bruce Buffer's screaming my name and says, it's time, and all that kind of stuff. It's not the punches, kicks, knees, and elbows. It's not the techniques. It's not the game plans. It's not all these tactical black and white binary things that people think it is. It really is, do I believe that I am better than that man and I should beat that man tonight here in the middle of this octagon? And that's the same that's true in business, same as that is true in your relationships. It's the same that is true in every single aspect of life. You can be really, really, really tactically good at something, and you can find success year after year or season after season. But eventually, if the self-image itself isn't keeping pace with that, eventually there's going to be burnout, there's going to be self-sabotage, there's going to be things that you're going to fall into to make sure that you don't reach that level, because a man or a woman can never consistently perform in a manner that's inconsistent with the way that they see themselves. You can find success here and there, like we said, tactically. You can be very good tactically at certain things, but eventually to find that long, drawn out, consistent year over year success, it all goes back to the self-image. So for me, I realized that, and I also realize who I am when I step inside of a cage in front of millions of people and I look like a tough guy and I look ripped and I look like that guy, right? They could be on a movie behind King Leonidas on 300, right? I look like that guy, right? But ultimately, that doesn't mean a dang thing if right here between my ears, I don't actually see myself that way and I don't think that I deserve to be there. Ultimately, I realized that the mindset side of things, the self-image side of things was it was definitely more important than the tactical side of things.
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, I'm trying to imagine, like I'm sure many people do, that, you're in this octagon, you're in this cage, and, it's getting towards the end of the fight, and you are out of breath, and you've taken a few hits, and you can't feel your legs anymore, and you're maybe vaguely aware of the audience shouting the other guy's name. Like, what does it take mentally, and what do you say to yourself in that moment to keep going?
Yeah, well, I think it's the decisions that I've made leading up to that moment, whether it be my 5 years at Mizzou Wrestling, where I turned myself into a mixed martial artist, or at least the spiritual being of where I needed to be to go into mixed martial arts, then work on the tactical stuff. All of the work that I've done over the last 14 years to get to that moment. And a lot of that goes back to a couple different things. Gratitude. I do believe I'm operating my best when I'm extremely grateful. When I wake up every single morning, I thank God for another day, the blessings in my life, what I do have. 2 capable arms, 2 capable legs, an awesome platform, a voice to speak, people that look to me and admire me, all of these different things that we can sometimes forget about. I'm very good at just going straight, blinders on, and just running my head into a brick wall, and you tell me to go and I'll go, right? If you're my coach, say, okay, I'll run through that brick wall if you tell me to. But ultimately, being grateful for what I have, and then thinking too, it all started too with Mike and Betty Chandler back in High Ridge, Missouri, my mom and dad, who worked 2 and 3 jobs nonstop to make sure me and my 2 brothers had every opportunity to be successful, to be to where I am today. Sitting here on this chair, speaking to you with the platform I have and the life that I've created for my family now, it all started back with those gifts they gave me. And to give anything less than my best every single day and pour myself into everything that I do, is to sacrifice those gifts, is to literally, it's a slap in the face to them. So gratitude, thinking about what they did for me, and then now having the woman of my dreams and having my 2 sons, and now it's so much bigger than just me. If I lose a fight, no big deal. Maybe I lose a little bit of money. Maybe I lose a world ranking. It means so much more for the masterpiece that I'm painting for my 2 sons, the promise that I made to my wife to serve and protect and love and to provide for her. So I have the past that has motivated me and still motivates me. I have my present right now with my family, and ultimately an overarching theme of gratitude. So in that moment, I'm honestly just operating with the muscle memory and the neural pathways and my spirit and my soul continuing to push me forward through all of the hard work, all of the deposits in the bank, if you will, that has led me to that moment to where I can push through, and people are wildly entertained by it.
Yeah, I suppose that makes sense. So in those moments where everybody thinks the minute or the second matters, it's actually just a compilation of your historical actions.
Yeah, well, and we've watched so many movies too where, the guy gets beat down and he's bleeding or whatever, and his inner monologue, or Rocky's inner monologue, or the coach says something, and it's like, Sometimes that happens, but for the most part, it's you're in the moment and you are trying to make the best decision you can with the information you have, the split second information that you have right there in the moment. Sometimes you zig when you should have zagged, and sometimes you lose, and sometimes you make bad decisions, and sometimes you go back and watch tape and think, what the heck was I thinking? Can't believe I did that. Can't believe I made this decision inside of the confines of competition, but it's all a learning process. And I am where I am today because of my wins and because of my losses, because of my shortcomings and because of my triumphs, and because of, the tears that I've cried and the hard work that I've put in and the pain that I've put myself through, the times I've bled. And ultimately you're able to find something inside of you. So that's why I think it's a bastardization of the blessings that you have to not be pushing yourself every single day. And it sounds a little off-putting to people, like, well, this guy's a little bit intense. It's a little bit crazy. But I mean, I'm here to tell you today that I just have pushed so hard and tried to find the outskirts of my comfort zone in every single aspect of my life to get me to that moment where the lights are shining brightest at your greatest moment of opportunity or at your darkest hour, for you to inherently, spiritually, deeper than just the cognitive thinking of, am I enough? And I want to be able to answer that question with, yes, I am.
What's interesting is you talk about these things that I think a lot of people think sound good. Like, I'm a family man, I'm a family first person. But I remember when we were first texting back and forth, I was like, what do we want to talk about? What businesses do we want to talk about? What products are you really focused on? And we talked about your businesses. We talked about Cram, and we talked about Walk On Fitness, and we talked about, some of your goals for your business. But the line that I won't forget that you texted me was, so here are some of my businesses and hobbies, but my real passion projects are my wife and kids. I engage with a lot of business people, and that's rarely a sentence said up front. Where do you think that family-oriented nature came from, as it seems really important to you? And also, this thing we're at right now, what astounds me is, of like the 5 guys I know the best who have the biggest platforms here, like all 5 of them are super family guys before almost anything else.
I'm 6 years into being a father now, almost 10 years into being a husband. Some of these guys here, actually almost all of these guys here that you're kind of alluding to, have been in that quest longer, and honestly probably made a lot more money with a lot more businesses and all these other things. And I'm sure they would tell you, we always want to seek the material. We always want to seek whatever it is, the respect and the awe of driving a cool car, or having a nice big house, or having all these zeros in your bank account. And, guys here that would tell you, hey, all that stuff really is cool, but it took me 15 years to learn, or this experience to learn, that what is most important is who you're doing life with and who you're serving. Because ultimately, it's those things that are going to last forever. And that's what I've said about, winning belts and making a lot of money and all that kind of stuff. All that stuff really is awesome, and it's a means to an end to provide for the family. But nobody's going to give a crap about that stuff a decade from now. My sons aren't going to care about the world titles that I might win or the different accomplishments that I've had. All they're going to care about is, did you show up and do what you said you were going to do? And did you show up when I needed you? Did you serve me mentally, spiritually, emotionally throughout this process that we call life, And I really did have a phenomenal upbringing. My mom and dad supported me, loved me, took care of me. We felt safe in our home. And for me now, to where I'm at and the success that I have had, it's just, I look at what they did, how hard they tried. And if they tried that hard, and now I have a life that's probably easier than theirs. I work less than they do. I make more money for less time than they had to put in. I have this huge platform that's just such a huge blessing. It just seems like the only right thing to do is have your priorities straight. And for me, my priority always has been, well, okay, I might have this business venture, or I might have this fight that entails this fight camp, or all of the different things that have going on, but how does it affect my family? What lens can I look through it and see it coinciding with the Venn diagram of my family, my reputation, and who I want to be on the other side of it? Because ultimately, the lights are going to fade, and the interviewers are going to stop calling, and all of this stuff is going to be over, and I'm just going to be a retired MMA fighter, and all that's going to matter is the reputation that I have with those amongst the world who are able to watch me fight. And then the most important reputation is, who am I as a father and who am I as a husband? And it's just, both of my sons just deserve that, and my wife deserves that, and she's the most supportive, amazing woman that I could have ever asked for. So, it's pretty darn easy to make them a priority.
Take notes, dudes. Yeah, I think, my friend Alex said it really perfectly. He was like, the Queen of England, like arguably one of the most famous people on the planet, had the longest reign in history. You guys watched her funeral and everything, and she died. And how many times have you thought about her today? Not 3 or 4 or 6 months later, not once. And so you have a queen of an entire kingdom, and she is irrelevant 6 months after she died. And it sounds a little harsh, except I think it's true. At the end of the day, nobody will remember you, and most of your life will mean nothing except to a very few amount of people. Yep. So I think that's really powerful. Now, that said, you have some violence in you, obviously, right? Like, you can't do what you do without some point of violence. And I guess I think about that because my husband's Special Forces, and he came from a different background than you. A lot more trauma in his background, maybe, at least as far as he would say, and difficulty and strife. But he always talks about how his parents f***ed him up just enough to be a team guy and not enough to be a stripper, Yeah. And he was like, yeah, thank God for that,
you know? Just enough.
Just enough. But like, that violence for you, where does it come from? And how do you tap into it when you can't gratitude Conor McGregor to the ground? So what happens?
Yeah, I mean, you can't gratitude him to the ground. You can't joy him to the ground. You can't serve other people to put him to the ground. But I think ultimately, for me, the sport of wrestling was the same way. I mean, I wanted to bury people. I wanted to hurt them. I wanted to make them quit. I wanted to make them cry. But it's inside the confines of competition. I don't think about that at all in my everyday life. I mean, if anything, I'm probably the biggest pacifist you might ever meet. I am afraid of confrontation. I don't like confrontation. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't, people think, well, shoot, you must have had a bunch of free street fights. That's why you got into mixed martial arts. I never got into a street fight. Number one, I never really got into those scenarios. And number two, I was too afraid to get in trouble. So I think, for me, it's just another competition. It just so happens that people get hurt and stitches get put in and blood gets drawn and people get knocked out and choked out. It looks like such a violent sport. And if you're ever around mixed martial arts or you really dive into it, the people in mixed martial arts, of course, there's some violent ones, some people who really enjoy the violence. I wouldn't say that I enjoy the violence whatsoever. Now, if you watch when that cage door closes, it looks like I'm really enjoying the violence. And I've never once thought, well, I don't really enjoy this violence thing. I'm focused on the task at hand. That last bell sounds, or that guy gets knocked out, or the fight is over, whatever. Then it turns back into, okay, now we'll just go back to being normal again, And I think, if I could really just think about me and who I am, and because I did a lot of this work with my mindset coach, Jim Hensel, and it was like, who am I? And I think God has given me a really awesome gift that I'm extremely grateful for, to be able to live on both ends of the spectrum in a big, big way. Like extreme joy and peace and contentment and service and love. And then the most savage individual that just wants to dominate people inside of a cage. And somewhere in between, I'm always usually living on this side of the spectrum. And then all of a sudden that cage door closes and I've been given a gift to be able to go cross that line to be that guy. And some guys can't in this sport. Some guys live too close over here in the violence, and it shows for better or worse in their fights or in their craft, in their business, in their life. That's why self-image and self-concept and mental health is so important in this world. And I've just done a lot of work, I think, on myself to make sure I show up as the man that I want to show up as in life, in these kind of interactions and with my friends and my family and my colleagues. And then I show up as a completely different person whenever that cage door closes. And it's just, I think it truly is a gift. I think it's something that I didn't choose to. I've never once in my life tried to will myself or visualize myself into a savagely violent person inside of the cage. It just happens. And I think the greatest compliment I ever get is whenever I, meet somebody and hang out with them, and they're like, you really are a really nice, cool guy. You're pretty normal. And I'm like, thank you. It's actually because you can watch my highlights and you can see the way that I fight. And rightfully so, I would think the exact same thing about me.
There's a couple sayings. Like one, I can think, if you think that strong men are scary, wait until you meet weak men. And I think that image of, do you want to be the warrior in the garden or the gardener at war is really important for this time and date that we sit in. And so if you have the capacity for violence, but not the need for violence, that's actually really important to humanity overall. I mean, we know this from the theory of disarmament and what happens at a certain level. Some people need to have arms in order for others to not push forward. So I do think there's a huge place for violence in society that we don't like to talk about. And I think there's also a place in outlets for it, like MMA. Yeah. Most of the people I've met who do MMA, a lot of them you wouldn't know. And most of them are incredibly soft, like the people here that are teaching self-defense. And yet, in an action, I'd much rather be in this room than many others.
If you needed to, yeah. And it also goes back to, as you talked about being a gardener in a war compared to being a warrior in a garden. One of my favorite books of all time, John Eldridge, Wild at Heart, talks about how a man's soul and heart was designed, and every man was created for a battle to fight, an adventure to have, and a beauty to win. And in this day and age, in this society, there's less and less people who are seeking adventures to have and battles to fight. And I'm not saying battles to fight like getting in a street fight, but as you talk, like being in here, these men and women are having battles to fight in here, and they're learning things, mixed martial arts, jiu-jitsu, all of these different things, just pushing yourself so that you don't feel the need to push yourself in the wrong direction in other areas, And we've got things backwards in a lot of ways, and it's very important. And I do, even in here, we're doing gun disarmament, and we're saying, hey, okay, what do you do if a person sticks a gun in your face? My wife is here, my son is here, I'm walking down the street, downtown Nashville, whatever. And, the confidence that I have, if that happened, it's something, and I'm not just saying this to boast about myself. I don't know the techniques, but it's just that scenario where I think there's no way that I would not be able to protect my family in this scenario. And I can't imagine what so many, especially men, might think. And with that comes lack of self-image, which then leads to so many different things. And so you just have to be proficient in so many more things than we think we need to today.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I was scrolling through your comments on some of your Instagram posts.
Don't do that.
It's a terrible idea. Jesus, nobody do that. Like, you should go follow Mike Chandler MMA on Instagram. But I was scrolling through your comments, and whoa, speaking of weak man trying to sound strong, I saw that all over yours. Really violent commentary. And I get a few things, but mostly my husband and I chuckle at them.
Yeah.
But some of yours were really, really intense. I remember being at the McGregor-Poirier fight and hearing people yell and scream when one person gets hurt, and feeling what that energy feels like. I've never felt anything like that before. And so you have such vitriol directed at you. How do you handle haters? How do you handle people that say bad things about you? Is there something that you go to when that happens?
Admittedly, I do read more than I probably should. I probably should just post and not worry about what they say. But I think for me, it could be 20 negative bad things, but then there's one that's just like one of those ones where you get it, I'm sure, as well. Whether they're talking about me helping them with their self-image, me helping them with confidence, me helping them get in the gym, or the way that my fitness app has helped them and gained the confidence or lost fat, gained muscle, all of these different things. So I want to be in tune with the people that are in tune with me. And I am convinced that a lot of those negative comments sometimes too come from bot farms across the world. Social media is a weird place. But also I do, I'm not naive to think that there's definitely some real people behind those comments. And it's ultimately you just got to keep doing what feels right to you. And the people are going to comment with the way that they comment. And there's been those haters, and there hasn't been social media for hundreds of years, but for hundreds of years, thousands of years, there has been people that are not going to believe in you. They're going to trash you at every single turn. They're going to say things about you that aren't true. And ultimately, it's the highest nail that gets hammered, always. So if you can continue to climb and climb and climb, and so many people are so worried about trying to grab at your heels and pull you down from the rung that you're on, instead of just reaching up and trying to climb to the next rung themselves. Ultimately, it comes with the territory, and just probably similar to you or any of the other people that we kind of rub elbows with, we take a silent smile every single time we see one of those, because you're doing the right thing. You're doing the right thing when you have that many people saying things about you. And mine is just I like to talk candidly, but also not sound like a narcissist. But ultimately, I think being a mixed martial arts fighter, a UFC fighter, I'm similar to like your husband, special forces. I mean, there's only so many areas for the male gender where we're like that guy, like that's the guy, right? Maybe I don't want to be just like him, but I want that aspect of it more, So I think fighting in a cage and being on the big platform and doing what I do, looking the way I look, working out as hard as I do, I think there's a lot of aspects of desirable traits that most men would want, but instead of making that life for themselves, they would rather say something about it and accuse me of steroids or accuse me of this or accuse me of whatever. And it's part of it.
You ever let it slip and like accidentally feed the troll a little bit? Or are you pretty good at that?
Well, every now and then, yeah, I do. Well, normally, you know what I actually do?
What's your best one? Have you ever had one where you're like, that's a great comeback?
No, I actually never to trolls, but I have had a few good comebacks like to other fighters who have said things. Because I also came into the UFC and nobody gave me any credit, and rightfully so. I was outside of the UFC forever, world champion outside the UFC, which isn't really world champion. You're not the number one guy in the world. It is a world champion, but you're not the number one guy in the world. So I didn't get a lot of respect from my fellow fighters. So I threw a couple of zingers here and there, but for the most part, I'm more of a direct message kind of guy. I don't want to give you the satisfaction of responding to you on that public thread to let everyone else know that I'm even responding to you. So I'll just respond to you in a direct message, which they could screenshot it and show people anyway. And it's not mean. It's not, might be a little snarky, a little condescending, a little bit, Mike Tyson said social media made y'all way too comfortable with talking and not getting punched in the mouth type of,
100%.
And would I ever punch someone in the mouth for something they said? Absolutely not. But every now and then you're like, no, I'm not letting this one slip. The worst is when people completely make stuff up. Like I had a guy make something up. I was like, well, I work with somebody who went to high school with him and he was doing steroids in high school and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, that was a direct message worthy type of comment. And it's like, okay, why don't you go ahead and tell me who that is? It always turns into one more snarky comment, then I go back and they say, okay, actually, it's not true, actually, man. And I'm a big fan. Like, I'm really sorry. The amount of times that it goes complete 180 and they end up being like, well, man, I'm a really big fan, man. Just keep doing what you're doing. I'm like, no response, block, whatever. It's just, it's the
Haters
world we live in.
the biggest flags, I think. Like, it's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something in psychology, actually, they talk about that, where one, we have a negative bias as humans, otherwise we're dead, right? And then two, because we have that negative bias, we've realized, oh man, if we talk negative to somebody else, we get 10x the attention that we do from a positive comment. And so I can see where society conditions us to have that reaction.
It's really, really unfortunate.
Yeah. But I think as a fighter, it's fascinating because you really can't punch somebody in the face.
Yeah,
I can, but like not much might go to go down. That maybe after I use your app, then I'm gonna be on it.
Well, it's good though too when other people stick up for you, or they'll say something like, "You do realize how badly this guy would beat you up in one punch," and everyone else does the commenting and they go after the trolls, and it's even better. It makes me smile even more than me having to do it. You know, so it's kind of cool.
Well, it's true. So you were on Bellator for a long time.
Yeah, it was like a decade. Yeah.
And top guy there for a long time. Lots of people say you should have been in UFC sooner. Lots of people wonder kind of why that didn't happen, why you didn't get the look from Dana White or whoever. So what's your take on that? Why did that take so long? And then what'd you have to do to finally overcome it?
And it's fine. The way you frame the question is almost like, well, I wasn't good enough to go there, or the UFC wouldn't have taken me earlier. And I think that's what a lot of people thought. I honestly was making the best business decision that I could for a very long time. The business of mixed martial arts it's a beautiful, beautiful thing for certain people, and it's a tough, tragic thing for a lot of people. I was making a great living outside of the UFC and also saw myself continuing to build my platform outside of the UFC. So therefore, when I did come over, it was going to be a better business decision, right? And ultimately too, there was a lot of factors involved. It never felt like the right time to finish my contract, test free agency, and then field offers from other organizations until I think it was 2020. I had my last fight in Bellator in August of 2020. Knocked out a former UFC champion, Benson Henderson. It was a tough fight for me because he's a tough guy to put away. He's extremely durable, and he's a tough guy to look good against. You can beat somebody, but you have these fights where you're like, it wasn't that beautiful, graceful, dominant, because he's just good everywhere. So it was a scary time, but I made the decision to bet on myself. And then it's just crazy how, and I talk about this often, is so many doors in life stay closed and stay locked until it's the exact right, perfect time. and that door stayed locked or felt like it should have been locked for such a long time, then it was time to be opened, and I just kicked the door down. We had Khabib was the number one guy in the world. He retires. Conor and Poirier were tied up in their trilogy that they were about to have, the fight you're alluding to. So that gave me the title shot after my UFC debut win, and it all worked out perfectly for me. So people say, man, you should have been in the UFC much sooner, because I hear that a lot, and I think I came over at the exact right time, or maybe that's just me accepting my current circumstances and not having to look back and say, well, I woulda, shoulda, coulda. But it worked out perfectly.
Definitely healthier. That's interesting. So I don't know anything about UFC negotiations and how the business of UFC, or even if we don't say UFC, fighting works. Like, how does that work? Obviously, people are making hundreds of millions of dollars off of fighters. When you go into a fight, and you can speak in generalities, obviously, like deciding to go against McGregor, what turns on in your business brain? What do you have to negotiate, and who gets what? Like, you have an agent that gets something, then you have then obviously the UFC takes something, then you got to negotiate against McGregor. How does that work?
Yeah, so we're all under contract. So
per fight, or do you have a standing salary with UFC?
No salary. You only get paid if you fight. And it's usually, you could sign a 4-fight deal, you could sign a 6-fight deal, an 8-fight deal, and it'll be, say, 2 years or 6 fights, whatever happens sooner. If you got your 6 fights in 1 year, your contract's over. Or if you had 3 fights in a 2-year period, your contract is over. So it either goes by term, which is the time, or the amount of fights. You negotiate those terms, your manager or your agent, manager, or attorney. For me, I've had one manager my entire life who was also a criminal defense attorney who has negotiated thousands of contracts at this point, and a lot of NFL, NBA, and UFC contracts now. We've done the best that we could to protect me, also leave enough meat on the bone for the current promotion to always make them feel like they're sometimes getting a deal, if you will. I think you hear a lot of people who would never ever say that. They want to get as much as they possibly can, and they're going to dig their heels in, and it usually doesn't work out, because one thing that you have to realize, this is not just mixed martial arts. This is you. This is everybody in this room. This is everybody in every endeavor, every single scenario, besides a very, very, very tiny fraction of the entire populace. We're all replaceable. Every single person is replaceable. If you shut your phone off and you stop making content, there's going to be someone else who's just going to be just as big as you. That can well up something inside of you. We're like, wait a second. But if you can set aside
my TikToks are important.
Well, yeah.
Who would be able to survive without that?
Well, it's true, but it's one of those scenarios where in mixed martial arts especially, we think that the show won't go on without us, and it will. I promise you that. We've got mega superstars that retire, or Conor being out for 2 full years, John Jones being out for 2.5, 3 years. They can build new stars, and 1 year from now, there's going to be a guy that they're making money off of, just like they were making money off of these other guys. And having that approach, I've always had that approach. I had that approach in Bellator. I had that approach now with the UFC. We're all replaceable. The show will go on. And I think there's a certain level of freedom that comes with that. It sounds like you're giving away your freedom, saying, well, they're in control more than you're in control. But ultimately, there's so much more freedom that comes with that, because you can just operate, in my opinion, doing the best that you possibly can, and realizing that this whole show is going to end eventually for you. Nothing lasts forever. And yeah, you negotiate these contracts, and then when your contracts are up for negotiation, you get a new one, or
not.
There's time, or not, or you're 3 fights into a contract. They say, hey, you have grossly overperformed on this contract. We're ripping it up. Call us money. We're ripping this up. We're doing a new deal.
Interesting.
That happened with the UFC. I was 4 fights in, and they said, hey, we're doing a new deal. You deserve more. I'm like, okay. Now, had I been like, hey, I deserve more, guess how many more fights I would have had on that contract? I would have had to have those 2. We never would have went back to the negotiation table.
Interesting.
So if you take care of those who sign your paycheck, be a good employee, show up on time, do more than what is asked of you, it usually works out.
So if I was to do a pie chart like this of like how a fight works, it's like, I don't know, I have an agent, and like our agent manager fee is like 20%, right? And then you have your promotion fee or distribution. And I think of that in my business and say like my distribution costs me, so all my marketing people, is probably like another 30%. So that's 50% of what I make right there. Then on top of that, because our net margins at the end are more like 40%, we get to maybe keep 40 cents of every dollar.
that we make. On top of that, I have like administration and I have like legal and all that on the back end. So like in my world, maybe I keep 40 cents of every dollar that I make. Not exactly for you, but theoretically in fighting, what does that look like? Like who do you have to pay and how does that business shake out? Because there are people like Jake Paul, right, that are like, oh, I'm going to create this whole thing and I want to own the whole pie chart theoretically.
Yep.
And instead of me keeping 40%, I'm keeping 60 and they get 40.
Yeah. So, I mean, we pretty much as mixed martial artists, we're worried about two things, your fight contract and your fights, and then endorsement deals, sponsorship deals, relationships with company. You know, sometimes that starts out as free, you know, like everybody, it starts out as free product. Then maybe it starts out, then you get a little bit of cash and then a little bit of product. And then you get more and more cash and more product and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you end up with equity in companies, whether you made an investment financially or you're made an investment financially and sweat equity. And then, yeah, I mean, I just pay my management, if you will. They take their percentage.
Is there a company around you besides your manager? Or is everything you do?
My management they're an agency at this point. You know, when we started out, it was like a skeleton crew of just two guys, basically. Now they got, 4 or 5 people working underneath them. Someone handling travel and medical, someone handling going out and bird dog and finding deals. And so they've continued to grow, which is, good for all of us because there's a bigger pool to be able to find opportunities in. So I just pay that percentage and then
do you have like a PR
taxes.
person?
I don't. I probably should at this point.
And no social media person either. That's you too?
I don't. Well, I have a full-time media director. So he shoots all of my content, edits all of my content. We do our podcast episodes.
Posts it.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't. I do all the posting. We are in a transition right now where I've realized, hey, it's time to go a little bit harder throughout this year, especially leading up to this big fight. Probably going to have him take over some of it and then him post probably 50% of my content and me post the other 50 because I never wanted to relinquish all of that control because I always wanted every word that was sent out to people going to be me. It was going to be me and it was going to be authentically me. And truthfully, what I've realized now is it still will be mine. It just won't be me writing it right now and then posting it. It will be us actually scheduling it and then me writing it today and it not post for a month, but it was my words,
of course, yeah, batch content.
Yeah, or if it's a clip of a podcast or whatever, pulling out that clip and then me expanding on that, if you will, and then making sure it's just all my words that are going out to my people who, I think they trust me at this point. I think I've created a trustworthy following with a reputation of people who are
totally,
who say, hey, I like what that guy stands for, so I want to make sure I stay true to that.
One of your big things is if you want to influence many, you have to cast a wide net, which is why you have this podcast that is not just about fighting. It's about wisdom and philosophy and theory and ideology. And it's actually quite profound, having listened to quite a few episodes. And so I think the other way to think about it too is just like, how big can you get if you're in between fights, sending out tweets, it's hard.
Yeah.
But if you can allow other people to become the shepherds of your message, then actually you can have quite a flock because there's not just one of you out there tending it.
Coming from that too, I always wanted to break the mold of what people thought a fighter was. I mean, you think fighter, okay, you're like, okay, he looks like this and he acts like this and he lives his life a certain way. Yeah, exactly. Lives his life a certain way. And it's like, I've always wanted to break the mold. I always wanted that interaction of, holy cow, like you're like a normal guy. It's not exactly what I thought a fighter was. And it's like, well, not all of us are like that, but that's how I am. And maybe I fight in a cage for a living, but it's not the most important thing about me. So that's why my podcast is called Walk On Wisdom. It's not, MMA wisdom or, and we talk about mixed martial arts here and there. We'll take only MMA questions from our viewers, and then we'll make them into MMA episodes. But so far we've only done maybe 1 or 2 actual MMA episodes. And a lot of them are just, hey, I'm going through this right now, or hey, I'm struggling with this, or hey, this, my girlfriend broke up with me, or whatever it might be. I'm going through this transition. And then I just sit there and I always start the podcast with, hey, I am by no means an expert in anything, but I've been around the world a couple times and experienced a lot of great things. And here's what I have to say about it.
I love that. Let's talk business again for a second. So a lot of people have built giant empires with audiences like yours. I mean, not to use McGregor, but you do have this fight coming up with him. But he's sold his tiny little whiskey company for $500 million, right? We've had The Rock, not quite a fighter in the exact sense, but, grow his to be worth, I think, close to now $1 billion, right? What do you see for you?
Do you want a business empire? And if so, what would it be of?
Right now, focusing on this fight, building my platform, and then continuing to rub elbows with, like the guys we have here and doing business with them, doing good business with good people, whether it be real estate, whether it be in actual businesses like Cram, having my fitness app. Because ultimately, for me, it's always about the people behind the product, if you will, valuing the people over profit, valuing my voice going out to people and making them feel something. What I want most when I'm fighting is to make people feel something, make them feel something about their life, make them feel something about what they're going through, make them feel something about what they can accomplish. If a small guy from a small town who was taught to do small things, little old me can do it and somehow end up on that big stage, well, so can you. And I want them to feel that. So making investments in real estate, into companies, building my platform. I'd like to speak on stages and do big events and really get that one-on-one connection like we have here at Operation Blackside. I mean, the people that we have here, and they're all successful in their own right, They all have businesses and they're entrepreneurs or they're all doing awesome things. But to get this opportunity to hang out with them, we just got done with lunch and sitting there at a picnic table talking to a couple business owners. Andy's from Madison, Alabama. Joe is from Cincinnati or where, you're just getting to meet all these people. I think there could be a product or two in there. I think Cram is going to crush it. I'm excited about
Well, let's talk about that one a little bit because that's a pretty cool product. So I looked it up. It's Cram PB&J replacements, sort of like, what is that other one? It's like Uncrustables or something.
Yeah, Uncrustables been around forever.
Lots of processed stuff in there, basically sugar and additives, as opposed to this really clean product. So you are one of the backers of it. Why did you choose like a PB&J and why that company?
Well, ultimately, it goes back to the people.
Yeah, those two.
Austin and Ruth. It's a mother and a son who started it out of Colfax, California, kind of Northern California. It took me a couple conversations to realize, okay, these I believe in these people. And then also you try the product. It's absolutely delicious. For its nutrition profile and how nutritionally sound it is and nutritionally dense it is, how healthy it is for you, the fact that it also tastes good was enough for me, because obviously, like you said, Uncrustable, it's been around forever, owned by Smuckers, tons of added sugar, bleached white flour bread, and all of these different things, seed oil after seed oil after seed oil. We have no seed oils. The preservatives were actually, it's a natural preservative. We're nationwide in Sprouts. There's no sugar added, 19 grams of protein in our B, 16 grams of protein in our OG. And we're working on some research and development right now for whether it be an almond, kind of an almond butter, because some people are allergic to peanuts or, tree nuts. And there's all these different things. And they're forward thinking like that. They want to have numerous products on the market by the end of this year and then next year. So
is it profitable yet?
Profitable. Yeah. We are nationwide in Sprouts, and we've had conversations with, I won't say who we've had conversations with, because I don't know if they're going to happen, but we got some really good options as far as nationwide, big time grocers, because obviously we started online. That's how every business pretty much starts until you kind of get those sales to be able to get nationwide in Sprouts. So, but ultimately it's the people behind it, and they're awesome. And we just continue to keep on connecting the dots between all kinds of different people. And I think Cram's going to do very well.
So I've found that being married and having a lot going on, having a big platform, being relatively successful maybe, or just being married in general can be really hard. And so, my husband and I do this thing called team every day. I would say we do it 60% of the time, where in the evening we get together and we have this small little sort of framework that we take each other through so that we're touching base on some of the stuff that's bothering us through the day, maybe with each other or in life in general. Also just things that we appreciate about one another. And it's become a ritual for us that's helpful. For you and your wife, is there anything that you do habitually or a framework that you use to stay sane amidst the chaos?
Habitually, not all the time, but we have tried to be intentional about, similar to what you said, actually sitting down and going through our schedule, because we don't like surprises. Nobody likes surprises in general. I mean, some people can live like that, but whenever you live a life like ours, where she's got a full-time job, she's a career woman, we got our 2 children, we got me and all the craziness that I'm doing as well. life can also sometimes happen so fast that you realize, holy cow, I didn't realize what was coming up. We didn't realize we had that. And then all of a sudden, what you thought was going to be kind of a down week to be able to kind of hang out and get back to neutral turns into a very chaotic week. So us actually planning things out, and this was a huge step for me. It was kind of a beautiful opposite ends of the spectrum. My wife was so she was in kind of medicine, where it's just like very binary, very black and white. Everything was kind of planned out. You go to school and then you get your degree and then you go and you get your job and then you work your hours and that's medicine, right? Whereas mine is, I don't know if I'm going to make $0 for the next 3 months or I can make $1 million in the next month. I don't know. I might fight next week. I might fight a year from now, so she came from this, hey, I like to have everything planned out. And I came from I can't plan anything out because I don't know what the heck is going to happen. So she's become more towards the center and I've gotten better at planning things as well. So for us, actually making sure that we have things on the calendar, me being more proactive where I wasn't thinking as much about how it affected the entire family or us or her career. And her career is extremely hectic right now as well. Going off of that, obviously that's more kind of habitual or tactical. But then an overarching theme for us is me making sure that even when I've had the success that I've had and she hasn't needed to work in years, she wants to work and she enjoys work and she gets value out of work. She gets purpose out of work. She has arguably works more now than she did when we first got together, and she needs to work. She doesn't need to work even half as much as she needed to back in the day when we first got together, but she probably works more now and makes more now and provides more now than she ever has. And I've always gave her that ability to do so. And she needed that. A lot of guys did not understand her. They didn't understand that she was married to medicine. They didn't understand that, oh, well, if she doesn't text back in an hour or 2 hours or call back, is because she was doing a sterile procedure in the emergency room. And it became this personal thing. And for me, thank God she came into my life at the right time where I was very secure in myself and I was in love with mixed martial arts and she was in love with medicine, and our roads converged together. So me just making sure I always give her the leeway to be her own person, pursue her own thing. She never wanted to be a mixed martial artist wife or a professional athlete's wife. She never wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's some of the hardest work that you can ever do. But ultimately, she knows what she wants to do, and I've always given her the leeway, the permission to do those things. And in turn, I get permission to do all the crazy things that I'm doing and pursue the crazy things that I'm doing. And so I think that love and that mutual respect pays so many dividends day after day, season after season, in the tough times, in the easy times, and every time in between, because we truly are so equally yoked when it comes to that.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I think the world right now is having this weird mix-up about genders and femininity and masculinity, and in so many different ways that I try to largely not pay attention to. Yeah. But one thing that I've found is, because I've been a career person for a long time, is that it does seem today like you need a man, if you're going to have a career and you're going to be kind of a woman who's going to be relatively forceful or in her masculine a lot, however the hippies like to say it in Austin, then you basically do need this man that's really confident in that. And, my husband, being in his background, he could care less. He's like the least motivated by money human I've ever met in my life. He just does not let what society says should define him ever. He will walk around in mandals and jorts and a Hawaiian button down, and he will be the baddest dude in the room and will show it to nobody. He could give a fuck. Yeah. And I think it's really rare, but it's really powerful for people to hear men like you say that, because there's this one side, which is like, we were coming to this event and one of our team members' friends, we were looking at Operation Black Site, and I was like, tell us ideas, questions, what should we do to film here? And they didn't know me, obviously, and they didn't know who I was married to, but they were like, why are you going to an event that is focused on toxic masculinity? And why would you support that? And I chuckled on the inside, because I'm like, if this is toxic masculinity, we're in trouble. This is just humans being hard to kill, which really actually has nothing to do with whether they have a penis or a vagina. It just tends to be a good idea generally. But I wonder what your thoughts are on, one, this idea of, if you're tough and you're hard, you're a toxic dude. Have people said that to you? And do you have feelings on that one way or the other?
I've been, called that or accused of that or saying that I'm perpetuating that narrative. But toxic masculinity is, it's a real thing. There's masculinity, or there are men who they're toxic, but it isn't because of the way that God created a man. It's because of the societal pressures, the box that we put ourselves in, the literal chain and collars that we put around our neck, and we're being held back, or we're being pushed into the corner, or we're being told that we can't do this, or being told that we should do that. And we're being pulled in so many different ways. And what it means, the definition of what it means to be a man has continued. It's never changed philosophically. It never should have changed, but societally, it has continued to change. And even going back to my wife, the harder I work, the more purpose-driven I am, the more a little bit kind of off my rocker, blinders on, going towards my purpose, what I need to go to perform, to be who I need to be, ultimately makes me the best husband I can possibly be, the best lover I can possibly be, the softer I can possibly be, because you lose that softness when you don't have that hard. You really do. And then it just becomes this facade of being a tough guy, right? The facade of being equipped, the facade of being a real man. No person or no man who engages in those kinds of activities or actions that could be deemed toxic masculinity in its truest form is an actual real man. They are a small child with deep, deep wounds, and they never truly grew up. They never truly grew into the man that God created them to be. And a lot of times it's not their fault. It could be their parents. It could be the things that have happened to them in the past, the seasons that they have gone through that has just turned them into who they are in a negative way. But I think ultimately being able to protect yourself, protect your family, stand up for your family, provide for your family, having a battle to fight, an adventure to have, and a beauty to win is what makes a man a man. And that is the healthiest way and the healthiest thing on the planet. And it is interesting. I mean, yeah, I fight in a cage for a living. I try to knock people out. I try to choke them out. I fight them. I try to make them bleed. Ultimately, if I am impacting people, reaching people, making people feel something, inspiring and motivating people through the way that I'm living my life and through my performances, it's ultimately me pursuing my passion and fulfilling my purpose, which then in turn makes it vastly more hard for me to actually be toxically masculine, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I've never liked the term much. I think it's so misleading. I think there's just toxic. There are women who are toxic feminists.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
men
exactly.
Who are toxic,
if there's toxic masculinity, then there's definitely toxic femininity.
100%.
And truthfully, if there was a definition, I would say, okay, there's definitely a small subsect of people who fit that mold, if you will.
Yeah, I think if like AOC and Andrew Tate had a baby, we would just have the two of those like all together, you know?
Right.
Just both sides. The problem is, again, in this world of social media, the extremes get all the views, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we see it all the time. It's so fascinating on YouTube and everywhere else. But if I say something like toxic masculinity, or if I say something like communism, on either side of the thing, you're going to get all these views and all these whatever. And I think one thing you've done really well is you've kind of stayed out of the noise.
Yeah, sometimes I was just having a conversation in the taco line here, and I know what I stand for. I probably should stand up more. I should probably be more vocal. I think the best thing that we can do too, even going back to us making sure we don't get put in a box too, is, we could have that conversation. I probably could be more vocal about what I truly believe. And I think it's going to offend some people, and it's also going to get people to say, heck yeah. But ultimately, just operating in a sense that you truly feel like you are saying what you want to say when you want to say it, or as much as you want to say it, doing what you want to do as much as you want to do it, and not having anybody tell you that you need to, or that you should do more or should do less. And for me, I've always just kind of operated that way, where I want to do what I want to do and act the way I want to act and say what I want to say. And there'll be times where I say, well, I can't believe I said that, or I can't believe I did that. Well, that's going to get some unfollows. That's going to get some hate. That's going to be a headline, but it's all part of it.
Yeah, you're all over YouTube right now. We were searching your name, and it's like videos everywhere. We need to find a way to get you monetized on other people's stuff that they talk about. Yeah, we have a saying at Contrarian Thinking, which is civilize the mind, make savage the body, build the bank account. We kind of believe that you need to have financial freedom typically before you can have physical freedom, aka like
work where you want, when you want, on what you want. And then finally, you could have philosophical freedom of your mind. And in a society in which most people today, 1 out of 5 people will die broke, which is wild in a world where we have all this. I think one of your missions is, and where I kind of want to wrap, is on that make savage the body. Like, you have Walk On Fitness. You obviously are in great shape. You've got about 37 abs.
36.
I'm right around there. And so fitness is big for you. But obviously America needs it. We're more obese than ever. We have more chronic disease than we ever have. And we have more mental health issues than we've ever had. So